for almost all of you, if not all of you, you get to learn about a grandfather who you never met. And why do I say a grandfather? Because I'll tell you a little bit, and I'll tell you something that you certainly know, maybe something that you don't know, and then you'll figure out the answer. The pasuk says, as we all know, "V'shinantam levanecha," and Rashi says, "Banecha elu tamidecha." But there's another pasuk in Parshas V'eschanan, which maybe you don't know, because it's in the summer, it's Devorim, and maybe people don't get to it. But the pasuk says, "Vodatom levanecha v'livnei vanecha yom asher amadta b'charev." You're supposed to tell your children, banecha, uv'nei vanecha, your grandchildren, the day that you were at Sinai. The Yerushalmi says, it's also in the Bavli too, but the Yerushalmi says that not only does there a mitzvah of teaching Torah to one's children, there's also a mitzvah of teaching Torah to one's grandchildren. Perhaps it even goes farther than that, I don't know, but that's what the Yerushalmi says. So all of you are students of people who have learned from Rav Copperman. And therefore, they are Banecha, the student people you've learned from, and therefore you are B'nei Vanecha. And just like Banecha in the pasuk of Vishinantam Levanecha refers to Talmidim, as well as children, so certainly in the pasuk of Odatam Levanecha V'livnei Vanecha, to teach Torah to your children and to your grandchildren, doesn't just mean your biological children, it means your spiritual children as well. So many of the people that you're learning from in Michlala, some of them are biological children and biological grandchildren, are people who've learned from Rav Copperman, some very directly. The women teachers in Michlala, the vast majority were his students, as you'll hear today a little bit later on from Mrs. Hirschman. Those of us who were as a status of Talmid Chaver, which I was zocheh to have for many, many years, for over 30 years, learned much from Rav Copperman. In fact, some of you a little bit could be considered grandchildren or even great-grandchildren, even great-great-grandchildren. A few of you I've taught your grandmothers, so I got from Rav Copperman to your grandmothers, to your mothers, to you. So it's a zechus that you have today. The Yarzheit was Kaf Gimel Teves, which is about 3 weeks ago. Was observed by the family and other things as well. And depending on the scheduling, it's observed to have a chance to get to know the person, bizchuto, b'siyata d'shmaya, as he would have certainly added, that you're sitting here, that you're in Michlala, both physically and spiritually. And I don't just say in terms of learning, not just in terms of learning, but spiritually as well. Because besides being a great Talmid Chacham, and someone who taught Torah for many generations, and his Torah is found in many, many places. And many of you, before you came to Michlala, had the zchus to be students of his students. It wasn't just to teach Torah to have the knowledge of Torah. It's to have the understanding of what Torah means, Torah Hashem. The connection between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with part of that connection being the neshama shenasata bi, and part of that connection being the Torah, Vodatom levanecha v'livnei vanecha, v'shinantom levanecha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us on Sinai. So as you all saw the program today, there's lots of things happening. We have 2 Divrei Torah from Rav Copperman that were filmed years and years ago, as you can tell by the quality of the filming, as you'll see. And then we're hearing from Mrs. Hirschman, from first Rav Bernstein, and then Mrs. Hirschman. We'll talk about them. We come in from Tila Greenblatt, all of whom have their own perspective. Besides the Divrei Torah, Tila's will be much more personal. But both Rav Bernstein and Mrs. Hirschman's also will be personal. Mine is personal as well. So we'll begin to have some Divrei Torah from Rav Copperman. There's 2 sections, as you can see here. The first one is in English. The second one is Hebrew. It's shorter, but we'll talk about the second one when we get there. The first one is a parsha in Parshas Baloscha of Pesach Sheni. So I'll introduce it for a minute or two, just so we have a perspective. The Torah teaches us that at the time of Pesach Rishon, some people who were Tmeim Lenefesh Adam and weren't able to bring the Korban Pesach, and they said, Lama Nigra Vilti Hakriv, it's Korban Hashem b'Moado. Why can't we be part of Am Yisrael, this great national celebration of Yitzias Mitzrayim? And of course that fits in with Parshas Peshalach and Parshas Bo last week. This great national celebration of Korban Pesach. Last year we went out of Mitzrayim, and now we're bringing the Korban Pesach for the first time as a full celebration of the Yom Tov of Pesach. We're Tamei. The Torah forbids people from being Tamei. And therefore the Torah has a chidush. There's something called Pesach Sheni. For those who are unable to bring Pesach Rishon for various reasons, they can bring on the 14th of Iyar, 1 month later, Korban Pesach Sheni. What are the reasons? One reason, somebody was Tamei. The second reason, and that's the focus of the shir you're going to hear in a moment, is that they were B'derech Rechoka. They were outside of the area of Yerushalayim, or far from the Beis HaMikdash, and thus were unable to bring the Korban Pesach b'Moado. They weren't there. Even though in many circumstances there's a concept of ones patri rachmana, when things are beyond your circumstances, you're exempt. The Korban Pesach, people had to go, make Aliyah L'Rego, and bring the Korban Pesach. When I look at the words derech rechoka that are found in Parshas Baloscha, you're in a great distance. There's a machlokas tanoim if it really means a physical distance that you couldn't get from where you are on the morning of Yudalad Nisan of Erev Pesach to get before Shkia to Yerushalayim to bring the korban. So it was physically impossible. Or it means that you just weren't in the premises of the Beis HaMikdash, even though it was physically possible, but you weren't there at the time of the Chiyuv of Korban Pesach. Over the words derech rechoka, if you look in the Sefer Torah, look in the Tikkun, and in Chumash you might have it as well, there's little nekudot, there's dots written over the words, and the dots come to teach us something. What do they teach? How are we to understand it? That's what we're going to understand now and learn, Be'ezrat Hashem, from Yehuda Copperman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha.
Shalom. The question was asked and posed to Moshe Rabbeinu. Tmeim lenefesh Adam. What can be done? And the answer was that not only Tmeim lenefesh Adam have a solution, they can't bring the Pesach on the Yudalet Nisan, but almost anybody who doesn't bring Pesach Rishon can bring a Pesach. When? On Yudalet Iyar, Pesach Sheni. But in this particular unit, we're going to discuss the addition to the Tamei Lenefesh Adam. Because the Torah says that not only a Tamei Lenefesh Adam, but also Mishaya B'derech Rechoka, which would mean on a way, a long distance, he also brings Pesach Sheni. And the question is, what is Derech Rechoka? And in this particular matter, we find that the solution is a machloket amongst Chazal and a machloket amongst the Mefarshim in what seems to be an halachic issue. The word Rechoka is written, as you can see, Reish, Chet, Vav, Kuf, Hey, with a nekuda on the Hey. That means that even in the text of the Sefer Torah, there is a nekuda on the Hey. And we have a machlokit here, which we bring in Makor number 5. Ezri derech rechoka. We have one opinion, min ha-modi'in ulachutz. Modi'in was 15 mil in the language of Chazal from Yerushalayim, and taking a radius of 15 mil around Yerushalayim, anybody who was outside of that radius, when the hour for bringing the Korban Pesach came, at noon on Yudalid, he is exempt from bringing the Korban Pesach in Yudalet Nisan, and he brings it on Yudalet Iyar. But Rabbi Eliezer said, no. Derech Rechokah, he says, is anybody just outside the Beit HaMikdash, or the language says, Me'is Kupat Ha'azara V'lachutz, just outside the door. He is Derech Rechokah. That seems rather strange, that a person who's a meter or two away from the Beit HaMikdash shouldn't have to come in to bring a Korban Pesach. And he says, Lefichach nakud al hay. That is the reason why the hay has a nakuda. And our question is, in this particular unit, what does the nakuda on the hay really do? How does Rabbi Eliezer learn from this that a nakuda on the hay means that the person wasn't at a distance, he was just outside the building? The solution seems to be in the words of the Yerushalmi, which we'll explain, brought in Makor number 6. The phenomenon of nikudot on letters is known in the Torah, and they are listed in all good editions of the Tanakh in the Mesorah. And the rule which the Yerushalmi brings, and Rashi quotes it in Chumash also, is as follows. If there are more letters in the word without a nikuda, then we read the word as though the letter with the nikuda is not existent. Conversely, if there are more letters in the word with a nikuda, then we read those letters and we ignore the other, which means we follow the majority. In this particular case, the word Rechokah is written Reish, Chet, Vav, Kuf, Hey. Only the Hey has a dot in the Kudah. Therefore we read it Rachok. Now the word Derech is Lashon Nekeva, usually in Tanakh. Ish is Lashon Zachar by definition. What we're really saying then is that it wasn't a long distance, it was a person who was Rachok. And as we intimated in a previous unit, if you have to catch a train and you come 2 minutes late, you are Rachok. The train may be just 2 or 3 meters away from you, but once it's pulled out of the station, you've missed it. You are Rachok. Rachok from a destination is not always miles, it can be actually meters. The question is, did you make it or didn't make it? Therefore we say that since the word Rechokah is written with a nekuda on the hey, we read it Rachok, Ha'ish Rachok, Vein HaDerech Rechokah. That would be the explanation of the Machloket Tanaim. However, a problem is Rashi. Look, Rashi, the greatest of commentators, Rashi says, Nakud alav, in source number 8, Lomar lo sherchoka vadai, ela sheyachutz lishkupat ha'azara kol zman hashchita. Now Rashi is actually telling us, according to the second opinion in the Mishnah, he's going against Rabbi Akiva. And we have a golden rule, halachak Rabbi Akiva mechaviru. How then can Rashi, in his Perush on Torah, come out clearly against a very, very definite halacha as determined by Rabbi Akiva? That is the kasha of the Ramban. The Ramban can't understand how Rashi could bring a Perush against the halacha. Furthermore, says Ramban, and here we come to the crux of the problem, since Rabbi Akiva is also the simple pshat in the sentence. Now, the Ramban is very well aware of the fact that Rashi wrote in his commentary back in Chumash Bereshit Peri Gimel Pasuk Chet, Ani lo bati elef shuto shel migra, ulagada hamyashev divrei hakatuv davar davur al ofanav. Rashi says, my criterion, he says, is perushim, which I can give, which go either according to pshat, or those midrashim which are close to the pshat. So the Ramban says, he says, what you've done now is, we might say in the words of the Novi, shtaim ra'ot. You've come out against the halacha of Rabbi Akiva, and also against the pshat. How can you explain such a perush on the part of Rashi? The greatest of Rashi's commentators, the Mizrahi, answers very clearly. Rashi's concept of pshat here, he said, takes into account the problem of the nekuda. Rashi is discussing the word and not the entire context. If you take the entire context, the Ramban is right, there is no question about it. We're discussing a person who couldn't bring a Korban Pesach. Couldn't bring a Korban Pesach means he was Tamei or he was out in a distance. But Rashi says, I have a problem here. My problem is the Hey. The Hey tells me to read the word Rachok because there's a Nekuda on the Hey. Therefore, he says, I'm taking care of the pshat of the word and not necessarily the pshat of the context. In a case such as this, Rashi says, I allow myself the privilege of giving a commentary to a pasuk, shelo lefi halacha, or in Aramaic, lo aliba de hilchita, not necessarily according to the halacha, because the criterion which is uppermost in my mind at the moment is not to bring you the halacha, but to solve a problem facing me here in this particular word. And the problem facing me here in this particular word is nakud al-hey. So that's what Rashi wrote in his words, nakud alav. That's my problem, he says. My problem is to take care of the nekuda, and therefore, on the basis of that, I allowed myself to give a perush, shelo.
Second. Do this. Yofi. So we had a chance to learn, chance to sense a little bit what you're missing, but not by not knowing that grandfather, Rabbi grandfather, directly. Now, as we begin, we'll ask Rav Mordechai Copperman, son of Rav Copperman Ztzl, but L'chaim Tovim. We'll stand, we'll say 2 Pirkei Tehillim that we all know by heart anyway, but he'll say a pasuk, we'll repeat it after him, and the Kel Malei Rachamim, and then we'll continue. Rav Mordechai Copperman, please.
Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha Yoimam hashemesh lo yakeko ve'oreach b'laylo Adonai yishmocha mikol ro yishmor eretz nafshecho Adonai yishmor tzischa uvoyecha me'ato ve'ad olam Shir hamalois v'mamakim krosicha Adonai Adonai shima v'koili Dienos nevo kashuvois lekol tachanunoi Im avoinois tishmor yo Adonai mi ya'amoid Adonai Mishomrim Laboiker Shoimerim Laboiker Yachel Israel El Adonai Ki im Adonai Chesed Ve'arbei Imoy Fedus V'hu yivdes Israel Mikol Avoy Naiso El male rachamim shoichem v'amroimim Amtze menuchon lechono al kanfei hashchino V'ma'alo izdoishim utoirim Kezoyar harakim Yom hazilim es nishma Savim oiri Arav Yehuda ben Avron Simcho Sholach Le'olamoi בעבור שכל התלמידות כאן לומדות היום ויד אזכרת נשמוסוי בגן עדן תהיה מנוחסוי לכן בעל רחמים יסתירהו בססר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרוי בצרוי רחיים אס נשמסוי אדוני נחל עשוי וינוח בשלום על משכבוי ונאמר אמן.
As I said, the Yarzheit was about 3 weeks ago, Kuf Gimel. But I realized this morning that we're Erev Parshas B'Shalach, and that I have a personal connection going back probably 50 years. I was a little bit older than you. Going back 50 years with Sefer Meshech Chochmah, having to do with Parshas B'Shalach. I don't think it happened Parshas B'Shalach. That much I don't remember. That much I don't remember. I don't know if Rav Bernstein heard this either. But about 50 years ago, maybe even more, I was standing in the yeshiva bookstore looking at books that I was interested in, I couldn't afford, I don't remember right now. One of the Rosh Yeshiva, when Rav Copperman lived in Chicago, they were in yeshiva together, some of the same age, Rav Ztzl, who his first Yarzheit was last week, comes over to me and he says, "Do you know this?" Do I know what? So he points to Meshech Chochmah. It could be that the Meshech Chochmah Sefer on Rambam or Sameach I knew at that time. Maybe I didn't know. I don't remember. I had no idea what Meshech Chochmah was. I'd met Rav Copperman before. He was in Chicago. He spoke one time. At a certain time I'd heard it, but went by my mind. And Rabbi Sender Ztzl said, if you're going to learn something, Meshech Chochmah, here's what you should learn. And he opened up the Parshas B'Shalach to the pasuk, V'amayim lahem chomam miminamu mismolam. The water was a wall to the right and to the left, pasuk that we all know. And at that point, the Meshech Chochmah discusses the difference in how HaKadosh Baruch Hu relates to the individual and his expectations of the individual, and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu relates to the nation, Am Yisrael Bichlal, and his expectations of us as Am Yisrael as a nation. And of course, in one way, we know all the expectations are the same. There's mitzvos that apply to us as individuals, mitzvos that apply to the tzibur. Whatever applies to us as individuals applies to us whether or not we're a member of the tzibur, we're individuals. Nonetheless, says Meshech Chochma, one will see what Rav Copperman's commentary adds to that as well, but I'll just share with you this Meshech Chochma on this anniversary of my knowledge of what the Sefer Meshech Chochma says. As much as the individual is demanded to worship Hashem, to stay away from Avodah Zarah, so is the nation, but the nation has another tzivui. That which counts to the nation, that which determines in certain aspects of whether there's galus or not, despite all that we've learned in Sefer Malachim and all that we've learned in Sefer Yirmiyahu, is the interpersonal relationships of the nation. Am Yisrael. The Meshech Chochma doesn't point this out, but Am, say many of the Forshim, is like the same word as Im, with. Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael means Am Yisrael has to be together. And that which joins Am Yisrael together is mitzvos, but Ben Ab L'Chavero, that makes our connections one with the other enjoyable, palatable, something that we seek. If chas v'shalom those relationships are ruined, or they're harmed, or they're defective, then the Am becomes weak, and the Im becomes separate. We said earlier that Rav Copperman not only taught us Torah, but also the spiritual values. As one of the aspects it had, as well as the individual, meeting the standards that the Torah requires of the individual. Also the tzibur he created 54, 55 years ago in Michlala when it was first founded, was a tzibur of people who are together, who have goals that are similar, aspirations that are similar, no matter the individual differences that we all are, because we're all individuals and we're all separate people. Nonetheless, we have to have this Am that which joins us together. We're able to join together because the joint aspirations we have, the shifot that we have, are something we want to share because sharing with each other becomes a pleasant entity. That was part of the tzibur that Rav Copperman built in Michlala for Dorot. In the last year and a half, 2 years, Rav Emanuel Bernstein took upon himself to translate, annotate, and prepare in English Rav Copperman's last major work, Pshuto Shel Mikra, on Parshat HaShavua, in which in each and every Parsha, there's a certain aspect, concept of Pshuto Shel Mikra, and what it means is explained. Some aspects are repeated twice, 3 times. Some parshas have many aspects. Some are repeated only 1 time. And as someone who had the opportunity to look at the work as it was developing over the last year and a half, 2 years, there's no question about it that the kavod that it's done for the tzibur of Lomdei Torah, people who appreciate the values of Torah that Rav Copperman espoused, and now to understand it in a language that's easier, because the concepts are still hard, whether in English or in Ivrit. But if somebody's Ivrit is not so good and want to understand the concept, then the double challenge of the language itself and the concepts for some is too many. Now it's available. Now it's available in English in a way that it is approachable for those who want to learn something on a deep and high level. So besides the fact that Rav Bernstein's your teacher, and other aspects of his life maybe he'll share with us as well, that here it's most appropriate that he gives us a share on this day that we're honoring the memory of Rav Yehuda Copperman. Rav Bernstein, please.
My policy is whenever anyone asks me to speak in the morning, I say no. Because I teach in yeshiva in the morning, and I can't be missing. I make an exception for Rav Copperman. I've sent my Talmidim a list of 30 questions, YomIyun in the 8th Perek of Bava Metzia. I'm hoping that they won't notice that I'm not there. It's a funny feeling to speak to people that don't know Rav Copperman, that maybe never met him, or for so many years he was the Michlala. He was the Ruach HaChaya. You kind of felt that the Michlala were like his limbs almost. And all the staff, and there are stellar teachers here, they all aligned themselves somehow. They shared his vision. And then now it's a bit of a strange situation whereby he himself is not here, but his vision is still carried on by all of those people. And therefore it makes it maybe even more important to talk about him and to give you an insight into who he was. Everyone here owes their presence here to the fact that Rav Copperman was a very bold individual. If you ever heard of him, he was very mild-mannered, but he never backed down from something that he thought should be done, including Ztzl. And in so doing, he engendered in great measure the whole revolution of seminary learning, women's learning, and Torah learning. He once told me, I had the zchus of learning b'chavrusa with him for 25 years. And once, in a moment just of candor, I guess, he said to me, I could have taught in yeshiva. That was where I was headed. I was trained in yeshiva. I could have gotten a job in yeshiva. He said, I have a good mind. And I could have made a good contribution. But I went the path that I went into women's education, and I was zoche to make a decisive contribution. And Rav Copperman was very far from self-aggrandizement, but it was just a moment where it all comes down to the decision that he made to fill the gap that he felt needed to be filled, and to fill his unique role, and not just to do what everyone else was doing. And the result is here, and it impacted the life of thousands. I could talk about Rav Copperman all day and all night until the Talmidim come in and say, Higiyaz man kriya shema shel Shachris. I could talk about Pshuta Shemikra all day and all night. The recently published Sefer is just about 800 pages, and that's the simplified version. But obviously, the clock is watching, and therefore maybe just to share a few general ideas about how it's possible to have such an innovation and to make such a contribution into something seemingly as simple as Pshat. I mean, what could be simpler than Pshat? Its very name says the simple meaning. What room is there more to say? And the answer is Rav Copperman. There's a lot more to say. The simple meaning of Pshat. And Rav Copperman often bemoaned the fact that people use the word Pshat even in an inaccurate way. They use the word Pshat sometimes when they can't think what else to say. When they ask, what's Pshat in this, what's Pshat in that, they don't mean Pshat in the very accurate way. They just mean, what does it mean? So really what they mean is Maha Perush. What does it mean? That's what it means. But we use the word Pshat because it's there. But really, in Chumash, Pshat means very simply an understanding of the words of the Chumash based purely on the rules of language, grammar, and syntax, with nothing else available. That is called Pshat. Anytime you bring in additional information that's not in the words, you're probably heading towards Drash. What is important, by the way, and again, it's a mistake that people make if we just are not thinking properly. Many people say that Pshat is the literal interpretation, and then Drash is the non-literal interpretation. I'm not sure if you've ever heard that. It's a very common thing. The literal meaning is the Pshat, and then the Drash is the non-literal meaning. That's not true. In fact, not only is it not true, Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the pshat is non-literal, and it's the drash that's literal. I'll give you an example. As Moshe is given his signs at the Mare Hasneh, by the burning bush, to go and to tell Bnei Yisrael and show Bnei Yisrael. So the first is with the stick, it turns into a snake. And then the second is that his hand becomes leprous and then becomes okay again. And Hashem says if they don't believe the first one, they'll believe the second one. I think we know the pasuk. What does it mean? Now, why should they believe the second more than the first? And in fact, the pshat doesn't mean that. The pshat means if they don't believe one, so do the other one, and then they'll have two. Tovim ashnayim min ha'echad. The pshat in that pasuk is if they're not happy with one sign, give them another sign, and together it will make an impression. That's the pshat. It's the drash that says no. If they don't believe the first one, so then give them the second one. The second one they'll believe more than the first one. But why? Rashi says, because you'll say, you spoke Lashon Hara about Bnei Yisrael, and that's where you got saras. That's what the second one has that the first one doesn't. It's not just corroborative, it's a qualitative difference. That's drash. Because the accompanying commentary, I spoke Lashon Hara about you, that's not in the pasuk, that's drash. But the drash allows you to translate it literally. They'll believe the last one by itself. It's very interesting, by the way, just a parenthetical comment, but you can't keep the Bnei Yisrael down. They've been subjugated and oppressed for decades, and along comes Moshe, and Moshe says, "I spoke Lashon Hara about you, and I got saras." And the Jewish people are like, "That's right, you got saras. Speak that way about the Jewish people. You have to know who you're dealing with." Wow, self-esteem was apparently yet alive and well among the Jewish people. It's a chiddush. No one else treated them well, and no one else seemed to be getting punished, at least at that time. But in any case, what is the yesod ha-yesodos when it comes to pshat and drash? And these are the two realms now. Yesod ha-yesodos is they're not enemies. They're not in competition with each other. They do not vie for our attention with each other. They complement each other. And that's something that, unfortunately, there's many people, because we live in a binary world. You can't value something without devaluing everything else. It's about as deep as we go. Which means that you can't invest in pshat without negating drash. So you miss half the picture. And other people can't go for drash without ignoring pshat. And they miss the other half of the picture. Why not get the whole picture? But it's ingrained within people that if you go drash, you almost have a principled stance against pshat, and vice versa. Why should it be that way? It's clear that there is room for both. Why do I say that? Because it's clear that the pshat will not answer all your questions. You cannot answer every question in Torah with pshat. Which means you need drash. And it's fine. That's what it's there for. And the pshat is still there. Even when you finished all your drash, the pshat is still there. Ein mikra yotzim midei pshuto. I'll give you a very simple example. Where people who only go the route of pshat, they get stuck a little bit. I'm sure you've all heard of the pasuk, Lifnei iver lo sitein michshol. Do not place a stumbling block in front of a blind man. Classic. Okay, what's the pshat? What we just said? That's the pshat. And how does a person violate the pshat? You just need your materials. You need a blind man. You need a stumbling block. Put the two together. And there you have the pasuk. Now you may know that Chazal have other things to say about this. For example, Rashi quotes, Lifnei iver lo sitein michshol means, what does it mean? What does Rashi say? Bad advice, right? Rashi says, don't give him bad advice, because you know he's blind. because he doesn't know what's good for him, so you're misleading him. That's the stumbling block. Wow. That's Rashi. And the Gemara has a different understanding of Lifnei Iver L'Sitin Mirshal. Namely, don't allow a person to do an Aveira, because they're blind. If they don't know it's an Aveira, they're blind. And if they do know it's an Aveira, and they want to do it anyway, they're even more blind. So there's many shades of blindness. But we've moved further and further away from the Pshat. Whatever happened, I'm kind of missing the stumbling block. Life was so easy in Pshat. It's just a thing, and a person who can't see. And all of a sudden, more and more interpretations are heaped upon this pasuk until you can't recognize it anymore. So what's happening here? Ma zos asu Chazal lanu. Right? What are Chazal doing? The answer, says Malbim, is a revolutionary thing. They're reading the pasuk. You never know what will happen when you actually read a pasuk. You see, if we go back to the pasuk, Lifnei Iver L'Sitin Mirshal, and we translate commonly as, do not place a stumbling block in front of a blind man. So far so good? No sudden moves? So far so good. Okay. Translate that back into Hebrew and see what happens. Before a blind man, Lifnei Iver, do not place. Can anyone tell me the Hebrew word for to place? Lasim. And now we have a problem. What's the problem? The Torah didn't say what we thought it was saying. Because the Torah doesn't say Lifnei Iver lo tasim mirshal. It says Lifnei Iver lo titein mirshal. And now that's awkward. Because now it's saying, do not give a stumbling block in front of a blind man. But something before someone is not something that you give, it's something that you place. No, all of a sudden, it's not so simple. The pshat is not so poshut anymore. And as we've said a number of times, the meaning of the word lidrosh, the Hebrew meaning is to seek. Doresh letzion, to seek. What are you seeking? You're seeking a resolution to all the questions that cannot be answered by the pshat. The pshat means you're not looking for trouble. I want to get from one end of the pasuk to the other. I don't want to start up with anyone. And if there's no issues, I'm happy. But drash, it raises you could say the megapixels within the pasuk. And all of a sudden you start to examine things. But why exactly like that? It's doresh, and the pshat is done, but the drash is still going. And that's what, now you understand why Chazal said, Lifnei Iver L'Sitin Mirshal is advice. Because advice is something that you give. The opportunity to do an Aveira is something that you give. And therefore, you read the pasuk, you get the pshat. And if you read it again, and sometimes a little bit closer, you see where the drash comes from. And the two go together. Rav Copperman told me once there was one of these defining conversations that he had with his students. Most of what made him decide to open the Mechlala was conversations he had with students that he taught before he opened the Mechlala. It convinced him that something needs to be done. But he was once giving a shir, and it got involved in Medrash Halacha, in the Drash. And a girl comes up to him afterwards and says, Harav, aval ze lo pshat. Okay. Not pshat. So Rav Copperman said, Ani maskim im kol mila shelach. I agree with everything you just said. Chutz mi mila achat. With the exception of one word. Aval. But. You see, when you start a sentence by saying, but it's not pshat, that means that we have a problem if it's not pshat. It isn't pshat. Drash is not pshat, and the goal in life is not to make one the other. It's true, the two live side by side in perfect harmony. Every word you say is correct, just take out the word aval, and then you get the full picture. Now, sometimes the pshat and the drash, they harmonize very well. sometimes they seem to give us conflicting messages. And then the question is what to do. And I'll give you a simple example. And this is a Rav Copperman classic. In Parshas Mishpatim, if a person damages someone else, he puts out his eye. Everyone knows, ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. Now everyone also knows that lemaisa, that doesn't happen. I mean, should it ever happen, I'm not sure if anyone actually had their eye put out, or if this ever was lemaisa, but if it was, the halacha is not that the attacker gets his eye put out. The halacha is he has to compensate him the value of his eye. Money. So in the pshat, the punishment is you put his eye out. In the drash, the punishment is money. Now, eyes and money are not the same thing. So now the question is, what to do? And here, there are two approaches. And Rav Copperman knew both of them. He identified with the second one. The first approach, because don't forget, Chazal said, Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. The Chazal themselves, who are involved only in drash, remind us not to leave the pshat behind. Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. Okay, that could mean one of two things. It could mean that even though the pshat seems one way and the drash seems another way, but if you look deeper still, you will see that the drash answer can also be found in the pshat. You see, that's one approach to ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. As if to say, it looks like the drash went completely away from the pshat, but not completely. In the depth of the pshat, you'll find the drash. You see, and then in the end, it really is looking to unify those two. That's the approach which tends to be taken by the Ksava Kabbalah, by the Malbim, and by others. But the approach that Rav Copperman identified with more is that ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto doesn't mean if you squeeze the drash, you can put it back into the pshat. Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto means the drash says one thing, the pshat says another, the halacha is like the drash, but don't forget the pshat because there's something else there for you in the pshat. Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto means don't ignore the simple meaning because even if it's not what the drash is telling you, so it's something else the Torah is telling you. Or to put it in Rav Copperman's words, the pshat doesn't always teach you halacha, but it always teaches you Torah. And sometimes there can be more to the picture of what the Torah wants to communicate than just what the halacha is. And in the example of ayin tachas ayin, amazingly, the Rambam himself talks about this. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. He doesn't really discuss or digress often. It's very psak orientated. Yet here, when the Rambam discusses ayin tachas ayin, and he says the halacha is you got to pay, right? It's money, the value of his eye. But then the Rambam doesn't move on without saying, no, so why does the Torah write ayin tachas ayin? If the halacha is money, how come the Torah didn't write money? And that's an interesting question. And to that, the Rambam says, because the Torah wants to let you know that this is what should happen. If you put out someone's eye, you do deserve that your eye should be put out. How can you do that to someone? Lemaisa, it doesn't happen. But don't forget that that's what should happen. And what type of message is that? Yes or no? Do I take out my checkbook or no? Or do I buy a pair of dark glasses? I mean, I need to know what to do. But the point is, it makes a difference. Because it's a difference in outlook. Outlook is also part of Torah. How to view another person is also part of Torah. You know, if you damage a person's property, you've got to pay. And if you injure a person, you have to pay. But a person is not a thing. A person's not a piece of property. And don't forget that. And if you remember it, and maybe you'll be little bit more careful. It's a Musar message. It's a moral message. Moral messages are also part of Torah. And therefore, you have the harmony of Pshat and Drash. The Drash derives in the ways that it does. It's a little complicated. It's 2 dafim in Maseches Bava Kama. The Drash derives that it really means money, practically. But don't forget the Pshat, because the Pshat tells you to take care of how you relate to other people. A person is not a thing. That's a good message. People are people too. And in fact, Rav Copperman, we're not going to go through all of them, but Rav Copperman established 11 distinct answers to this question of what the Pshat is doing when it's not exactly the halacha as the Medrash defines it. And in his original Sefer, Pshita Shamikra, which is not for the faint of heart, people who start that Sefer need to say Birchas HaTorah and Tfilas HaDerech beforehand. It is very, very tough going. But in that Sefer, he lays out the full 11 functions of Pshat. It's 11 answers to this question. Why is the Pshat not like the Drash? Okay. Let's move towards another area. And again, we're looking just to understand how the Pshat and the Drash go together and what happens when the Pshat and the Drash do not seem to be saying the same thing. Sometimes, the Pshat is not the same as the Drash, but it still teaches halacha. How can that be? I thought that Drash takes on the halacha. If the Pshat is not the same as the Drash, how can it also tell me halacha? So let's talk about Avodas Yom Kippurim. Avodas Yom Kippurim, as we know, is has very unique aspects to it. I hope I made all my mistakes already. Avodas Yom Kippurim has unique aspects to it. Among them, the Kohen Gadol goes to the mikveh. How many times? He asked expectantly. How many times? 5 times. If you're Hasidish, you'd know this. That no one else can go to the mikveh. So the Kohen Gadol goes 5 times. That's correct. Every time he changes between clothing, with the gold and the white and the gold and the white and the gold, between each and every time, he goes to the mikveh 5 times. Now, if you open up the Chumash in the parsha that deals with Avodas Yom Kippurim, and which parsha deals with Avodas Yom Kippurim? We haven't been in Michlala for that parsha, otherwise you'd for sure know. Parshas Acharemos, right? Acharemos, and then that's Vayikra Perek Tesvav. Now, if you look through that parsha, and you follow and you track the changes, you will see that there only seem to be 3 changes of clothing, from gold to white and gold. Not the 5 that we know. Okay. And maybe it should bother you. Because we know that there's 5 changes, but look at the parsha, you'll only see 3. And that's a Pshat question, by the way. Because Pshat deserves, or Pshat states that the Psukim deserve to be read in order. And in fact, the halacha is that some of those psukim are taken as out of order, that he goes from gold to white, and then back to gold again, and white again, but it's not in the psukim. If you read the psukim, you'd never know there's more than 3 changes. The halacha states there's 5. 3 and 5 are not the same. Even in the cell phone era, we still know enough to know that 3 and 5 are different numbers. So, how do you reconcile? Says the Vilna Gaon, there is an amazing medrash which states that how many times a year can the Kohen Gadol go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? This is not a trick question. Just the once. And Yom Kippur, anyone knows that. However, the medrash says that is true for every Kohen Gadol after the time of Aaron. But for Aaron, in the Midbar, he could go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim whenever he wanted. He could go in any day. It's a chiddush, if you've never heard it. He just needs to follow the avoda of, as is outlined in that parsha. But then he can go in on any given day. And the Medrash elsewhere says that he did. It's amazing. He could enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim as long as he has the Seder Avoda. Wow, that gives us an entirely new look at this perek of Vayikra. And in fact, it may even answer pshat questions within that perek. Yom Kippur is not the only Yom Tov that's discussed in the Chumash. All the Yom Tovim are. Every single time a Yom Tov is discussed, the Torah starts by telling you what day it's talking about, and then says what should happen. On the first day of the 7th month, on the 15th day of the 7th month, on the 15th of the 1st month, it's Pesach, it's Sukkot, it's whatever. That's the rule. Makes sense, right? When are we talking about, and then what's happening? But in Parshas Acharemos, with regards to Yom Kippur, it's reversed. There is no mention of Yom Kippur until the very end of the perek. Take a look. In this perek Zion. Take a look. You've got the whole thing that's going on, and we don't even know when we're talking about. And at the very end, just before we finish, the Torah says, oh, by the way, in case you're wondering when this is, it's the 10th of Tishrei. It's the 10th of the 7th month. Why is it backwards? How come the timestamp for this parsha is given at the end, unlike every other moed, every other Yom Tov, where it's the very first thing that's said? That's a pshat question. But what is the pshat telling us? That unlike every other avoda, this is not restricted. This was not restricted from the outset to Yom Kippur. It could happen at any time. And you know what else is interesting? Throughout that parsha, it always talks about Aaron. Aaron should do this, you know, the Shnei Seirim, and then the Ketores. Aaron should go here, and then he should do there. It doesn't refer to the Kohen. It refers to Aaron. Because it's about Aaron. It has a unique relevance to Aaron, which is not restricted to a specific day. That's pshat. It's only at the end of the perek that we begin to hear about the 10th of Tishrei, and then it starts talking about the Kohen. Because that's when it gets formatted for later times. So now we see, right, if we're following, this perek of Chumash, it almost has like a dual focus. You've got the pshat, and the pshat relates to Aaron, just Aaron himself, at that time. What's called halacha l'sha'ah, halacha for that time. But it has another identity. It's also halacha l'doros. As by the time the perek ends, it gets formatted into, for all generations, the Kohen, but only on Yom Kippur. So, says the Vilna Gaon, how many tevilos did Aaron need to do? How many times did he need to change from gold to white to gold if he would go in just on any given day? The answer is just 3. Don't we know that the Kohen Gadol changes 5 times? That's a din in Yom Kippur. That's true for Yom Kippur. But the special possibility that Aaron had to do this avoda did not require 5 times. 3 is enough. And you know what? That's why the pasuk only talks. If you read the psukim, you only see 3. Because the immediate pshat understanding of the psukim is as it relates to Aaron. Aaron only has 3. It's bedafka. And it's not bedafka out of order. It's bedafka in order for Aaron. We will discover later on that there's other aspects of this. It's for Yom Kippur every year. And then we have a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that there's 5. But the pshat is exactly as it should be. And the two go parallel. The pshat of the pasuk teaches you halacha as it related to Aaron, and the drash teaches you halacha as it relates to a Kohen Gadol every year. And you see that when the Torah had to choose, so to speak, 3 or 5, it chose 3. Because that's halacha l'shah. So both pshat and drash teaching are saying different things, and they're both halacha. One for a certain time, and one for all time. And maybe we'll conclude with a final example, where the pshat, if we're okay with the terms here, right, the pshat and the drash, they say different things, and they're both halacha, and they're both halacha for all times. They're both halacha ledoros. What's an example? Matzah. Now, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but the halacha states that there is only one night a year that it is a mitzvah to eat matzah. And you know which night that is. That's when Kazayas becomes the sugya of the evening. That's Seder night. After Seder night, there is no, this is the words of the Gemara, there is no mitzvah to eat matzah. And you can see it, by the way, because we only make a bracha ala chilas matzah on Seder night. It's not like Sukkah, where for all 7 days, whenever you're in a Sukkah, you make a bracha sheka deshana leishi b'sukkah. So if matzah is all 7 days of Pesach, we call it Chag HaMatzos. So they make a bracha ala chilas matzah every time you eat matzah. And we don't do that. Only on Seder night. Where does it come from? It's a little bit involved, actually. It's not what would meet the eye. But briefly, the pasuk says to eat matzah for 7 days. That sounds pretty straightforward. It is. Until another pasuk elsewhere says to eat matzah for 6 days. And then the 7th day goes missing somehow. And when the 7th day goes missing, so maybe that means that all the days have no mitzvah of matzah. That's slightly not intuitive. If you're familiar with that section of Rabbi Shmuel, it's just before Psukei de Zimra, just after the Korbanos. I'm not sure if you have a chance to say it every day. My father used to say that often if a person comes late for davening, so the first thing that gets sacrificed to the Korbanos. But it's one of Rabbi Shmuel's principles. Something that was in the klal and then left the klal, it teaches you about the whole klal. And that's what happened. We have one pasuk says 7 days, one pasuk says 6 days, so there's a day missing. It's left the klal. There's no mitzvah apparently, and it teaches you about the whole klal. There's no mitzvah at all now, until another pasuk says, oh, don't forget to eat matzah on Seder night, that's a mitzvah. So the drash has taken us a little bit all over the place. And if at the end of the day the Torah just wants to tell us to eat matzah on Seder night, so why not just say that? We've gone a very roundabout route, or in Rav Copperman's words, we're being taught that the arithmetic of this halacha is that 7 plus 6 equals 0. Which it doesn't, by the way, just apropos of my earlier cell phone comment. So if you want to say 0, don't say anything. Why say 7 and then undo it? It's a good shaila. And the answer, again, says the Vilna Gaon, and you see why the Vilna Gaon is looked upon as one of the main mefarshim in this Beis HaMedrash that Rav Copperman attached himself to. The Gaon says, you know, there is a mitzvah to eat matzah on all of Pesach. It's just not a chiyuv. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you do, it's a mitzvah. It's a certain type of mitzvah. What's that mitzvah called, where you don't have to, but if you do, it's a mitzvah? Mitzvah kiyumis. Not chiyuvis. No obligation. But if you did, it's a mitzvah. There are certain mitzvahs like that. Matzahs like that. And now, says Rav Copperman, you understand how the pshat and the drash go together. The drash, by the time it's finished working through all of the psukim, there's only one night that it's a mitzvah. So if you say in the drash, when does this apply? Just Seder night. But if you look at the pshat implies that it's all 7 days. So the question is, well, which is it? Is it Seder night just, or is it all 7 days? What's the answer? Yes. Because it is both. The mitzvah chiyuvis, a chiyuv is only on Seder night. We make a bracha, shek kiddishanu b'mitzvos vitzivanu on Seder night. But there's still another mitzvah, kipshuto. It's a mitzvah kiyumis. A person doesn't get a punishment if they don't eat matzah after that time. They haven't negated a mitzvah, but if they do, they fulfill the mitzvah. That's kipshuto. So the pshat and the drash, once again, are side by side. And they both teach halacha, ledoros. And they say different things. And there's 2 tiers of halacha. As you can appreciate, plenty more to say. I hope we have not overloaded too much with examples, and I hope everything as it came across clearly and gave a bit of a sense of what Rav Copperman was doing. Because one could say, and Rav Copperman himself said, that even the question that people ask, it's not always the right question. That people ask, ma pshat? What's the pshat? That's not the full question. The full question is, ma ha-pshat melamed? What is the pshat teaching me? It's not enough to say what's the pshat, because the pshat is not the only way to look at the pasuk, and therefore, ma ha-pshat melamed, what is its unique contribution? And that should hopefully give a bit of a sense of the chiddush that Rav Copperman brought to the table of Torah. I just want to conclude by talking about Rav Copperman himself in a way that perhaps can help us, in a way that we can learn from. There's many things that Rav Copperman did that I don't think we can do, in which case it's important to appreciate him, but not necessarily for emulation purposes, you know. What did Rav Copperman do? Well, he wrote a Perush on the Meshech Chochmah and the Sforno. He revolutionized understanding of Pshat, opened a school called Michlala, and trained thousands of teachers. Okay, that's very good. I'm not sure that the takeaway is that, and therefore we should all do that. You should appreciate what he did. But I think dafka, because of all the things he did, there are certain things that we can emulate. Rav Copperman, firstly, in terms of his midos, and it's important, by the way, I hope what I'm saying is not oversimple. Sometimes people that are extremely intelligent do not always have the accompanying midos. Sometimes all of their juice gets put into the intellectual sphere, and not much is left for being a person of midos, which makes it all the more important to recognize that with all of his accomplishments, Rav Copperman had an amazing simplicity about him, and it really was something to behold, because even within the realms of humility, there are certain people that are humble in a way that it could be grating a little bit, you know. The people who are at the back of the room when there's a wedding or something, and then they trample over everyone in order to get to the bracha that they're called for, because who, me? I never would have thought. And you spend the next 10 minutes finding out how humble they are. Or they run away from covet and they break all the furniture on the way out. You know what I mean? You can hear it in the next neighborhood. You know, Plonies running away from covet. And with Copperman, there was none of that. It was so natural. There was no noise. It was just amazing. But how could he be so humble? I mean, he'd done so much. How could he be so humble? I think the point is, and it's true for Rav Copperman and people like Rav Copperman, the reason why he was humble is because he saw all of his achievements as being greater than he was. He saw all the things that he was working for as being higher than he was. That's what separates a humble person from a Baal Gaiva. Someone who's a Baal Gaiva, all the things they do, but they're on top, and it's all feeding into them. Rav Copperman did all those things, but he was down at the bottom, and he was feeding upwards towards all those things that he so strongly believed in. I don't think many of us will ever have a fraction of the cause for Gaiva that Rav Copperman had, because he was like a team of 20 people. But that we can learn. If Rav Copperman did all those things, but he was goal-orientated, he was purpose-orientated, and therefore his focus was always on the purpose and never on himself. And that's what it brought out everything that he could possibly do. That's an amazing thing. I think that is a lesson for emulation. Because in the things that we go ahead and do, and hopefully we'll do important things and worthwhile things, if we choose correctly, the things that we do are more important than we are. And if we maintain that perspective, we'll be like Rav Copperman, and we'll be able to have that simplicity and that truth. I think another thing which is also important, Rav Copperman came from a time before everyone started multitasking. He had no concept of multitasking. And that was the secret. You know, people say, how did he do so much? But what's amazing is he debunked the modern theory that the way you accomplish many things is by doing many things at once. I never saw him do more than one thing at once. But whatever he did 100%. Whoever he spoke to 100%. You know, I don't know if you get this feeling. Sometimes you meet with someone who's like they're an important person. Because they're important and because they're busy, so they're busy even when they're talking to you. And even if they're not even doing anything else, they're just busy. You know, of their RAM space, 90% is just taken up with whatever is going on with them. There's a maximum of 10% for you. If you're lucky, you'll probably get closer to 5 or 6. And that's called having a meeting with an important person. And how amazing it was. And I think every single person that ever met Rav Copperman felt this. They didn't necessarily speak to him for that long. Maybe a moment or two, maybe a bit more. Rav Copperman was with them 100%. And that's why they remember what he said. And that's why they remember that encounter, because you got 100% of the person. But what's he saying? He's saying, whoever I'm talking to now, whatever I'm doing now is the most important thing. And whoever I'm talking to now is the most important person for me to be involved with now. You got 100% of Rav Copperman. It's amazing. He gave 100% to everyone. Because everyone was important to him. Every Thursday at 6 p.m., 6 to 7. So I would, originally it was here in the Mechlala, then later on when he moved, Rechova Piska, from 6 to 7, Rav Copperman, you felt like he had nothing in the world going on except what he was learning with you. That's it. 100%. But then what was further amazing is that frequently the phone would ring, depending on the time of year. There were times when I don't know how his phone lasted. His phone would ring in epidemic proportions if it's before Pesach. I mean, he has a lot of Talmidot that want to speak to him. It's before Rosh Hashanah. I mean, it would just ring off the hook. And what's amazing is he would always answer, and he answered himself. He would always answer. And as soon as he answered, he was instantly 100% with the person on the other side of the phone. 100%. And the transition was amazing. Because a moment beforehand, he was 100% with me. And before I came, he was 100% with the other person. And then this person's on the phone, he remembers him or her instantly, everything about them, and he locked in with them 100% for 90 seconds. They get the whole Rav Copperman. And then he put the phone down, and then he's back with me, 100%, until the phone rings again. And then he's back again. And it's the lost secret. But it's the answer. How is Rav Copperman so successful in everything he did? The answer is he never really went for that fad of doing many things at once. Doing many things at once just means you don't do anything properly. Whatever he was engaged in, he felt it was important. If it's important, it deserves 100%. And again, as we move forward, lots of things are vying for our time. Lots of things are competing for our attention. There's a temptation to multitask but things that are important deserve 100% of the person. And we see the success of Rav Copperman as testimony as to the difference between a person who is entirely there with what they're doing as a person who's fragmented and scattered and doing 5 things, none of them really properly. So the person and the teaching go together. Rav Copperman embodied all of his teachings, and therefore I'm happy to have spoken a little bit about what he taught, and also just a drop, but it's a fraction of what he was. But you hear fractions and you hear different people. Everyone has their unique experiences with Rav Copperman. Many of them are corroborative, and they're a collage, and they'll get a picture. And then each one has their unique hue and color, and that will further enrich the picture. And if that leads to an appreciation or a deeper appreciation of the personality who is behind the place that you're sitting and the way that you're being taught, so that will be an outstanding thing. Yehi Zecher Baruch. All the best.
The next part that we're going to see, the next year from Rav Copperman, is in Ivrit. It's about 5 minutes. So I want to introduce it to you as well, because part of it, it's an introduction. As you should have said before, that over the years, Michla had a number of video shiurim. Rav Copperman gave in a number of things. I gave in one year on Ramban, other things as well. And that's what we saw. And some were distance learning, however it existed in those days. I said Yechida. This handout as well, that people would look at the source sheet. And one thing that Rav Copperman did, which was made the headlines and introduced Rav Copperman to the wider world of Torah learning, was his Pirush on Meshech Chochmah, which was written over a number of years. I don't know how many years. Dr. Rosewasser isn't here. If she knows, I would ask her, but maybe she doesn't know. Written over a number of years. And therefore, part of the distance learning things that he did was Meshech Chochmah. And the shir that we're going to learn in this moment is an introduction to the Meshech Chochmah. And the introduction to Meshech Chochmah has two parts to it. One is Reb Meir Simcha, when he was born, when he lived, a little bit about his life, a little bit about his family, that the Or Sameach, which is a perush on the Rambam, he wrote early in his life. And the Meshech Chochmah, which he wrote, was only published posthumously after Rav Meir Simcha was nifter, in the 1920s, I believe. I have to hear again, I don't remember right now what year. And the second part is which I want to emphasize to you, that's the sheer part, is that Rav Kupin discusses why Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, who lived at a time of extraordinarily great Gedolei Yisrael, not just Talmidei Chachamim, Gedolei Yisrael. And he'll mention some of the names, you'll hear the names, Reb Baruch Ber, Reb Chaim Brisker. His comrade, as in the Rabbanos in the city of Dvinsk, the Ragat Shavar, a Gaon Olam, a Gaon Olam, talk about the highest IQs in history, probably he had one of them. But Rav Meir Simcha, and Rav Kuprin in his writing, when he talks about Rav Meir Simcha, the Meshech Chochmah, Rav Meir Simcha was referred to in his time as Sar HaTorah. Sarim, doesn't just mean officer. It means something like a master of Torah, the person who was in charge, right? Just like a Sar has a certain misra, a certain office in which he's in charge of, in which he has one. So he was referred to as Sar HaTorah. And Rav Kupman is going to discuss the aspects of Torah in terms of Machshevet Yisrael. If you learn Meshech Chochmah, you learn a lot of the Moreh Nevuchim of the Rambam. If you learn Meshech Chochmah, you learn Halacha from the Rambam, in particular Mishnah Torah. If you learn Moreh Nevuchim, if you Meshech Chochmah, Meshech Chochmah, you learn Machshevet Yisrael, you learn Halacha, Mishnah Torah, the Rambam, and you also learn Pashanut, because that's what Meshech Chochmah is part of, giving Pshat in the Torah. And that Rav Kupin wants to suggest is why Rav Meir Simcha is called Sar HaTorah, because of these three basic aspects of what Torah is about. Halacha, commentary, and the hashkafa behind Torah, Machshev Israel, which is called sometimes, philosophy if you wish. He was a Sar, he had rule over all of them. And even though Rav Kupman has told me in the past why he was drawn to the Meshech Chochmah, I believe that whether he was aware of it or not, but I think I'm right, he was drawn to it because he found a kindred soul. Because Rav Kupman's expertise, his focus, was on Parshanut, but it didn't take him away from Halacha, it didn't take him away from thought. As you heard a little bit, maybe you sensed in the first shir, which was different than this shir now, the idea of halacha, the idea of pshat, the idea of Jewish thought, how the things go together, because it's all Torah, and Torah is one. That is what I believe drew Rav Kupman, in particular to the Meshech Chochmah, the unique first major contribution they had to this contemporary Gadol B'Yisrael, allowing us to understand what he meant. And that was really the initial basis of Rav Kupman's development of Pshuto Shemikra that he got initially through his learning in depth of the Meshech Chochmah and the Perush he gave us. So now we're going to see something. Do me a favor, Gabriel. There's a light switch that says the second one from the to me. Yeah. So now we will see it. No.
הפרשן שבחרתי לעסוק בו הוא הרב מאיר שמחה כהן מדווינסק. נקדים כמה הערות על האיש ועל ספרו פירושו. הרב מאיר שמחה נפטר ב-1926 למניינם, בהיותו כבן 83 שנים. שימש כרב של העדה של מתנגדים בעיר דווינסק, שגם ידועה בשם דנובה, כאשר בעדה של החסידים שימש באותה תקופה ממש הגאון הרוגצ'ובי. רבי שמחה התפרנס בקושי מן הרבנות, ובעיקר פרנסתו הייתה מאשתו הרבנית חיה. כנראה היה לו חוש הומור די מפותח, כי כאשר פעם שאלו אותו מניין יש לו פרנסה, הוא ציטט את המאמר חז"ל, שחז"ל אומרים, מן דייב חיי יייב מזוני, זה הקדוש ברוך הוא שנותן חיים, נותן גם מזונות. הוא שיחק בלשון, כי מן דייב חיה, אשתו הרבצן הרבנית, היא נותנת את המזונות, את הפרנסה. ציינתי את החוש ההומור, משום שחייו לא היו קלים. לא זכה לבן זכר, והייתה להם בת יחידה אחת, שהייתה חולה כל ימי חייה. אמנם נישאה, אבל גם היא וגם בעלה, שגם הוא היה תלמיד חכם גדול, ורבי שמחה מצטט אותו בספריו, נפטרו בחיי ההורים. הפירוש של רבי שמחה ידוע בשם משך חוכמה. שתי מילים לקוחות מפסוק בספר איוב, כשיש כאן משחק על הלשון והשם, שהרי מם שין כף זה ראשי תיבות מאיר שמחה כהן. בעולם הישיבות היה ידוע מפורסם בשם בעל אור שמח, גם כן שמח מלשון שמחה. ואמנם כן, פרסם את ספרו הקלאסי על הרמב"ם אור שמח, עוד בהיותו צעיר בימים, וזה העמיד אותו בשורה הראשונה של התלמידי חכמים שבדורו. את ספרו משך חוכמה לא פרסם בחייו. הסיבה לכך היא שאביו קלונימוס, זיכרונו לברכה, יעץ לו לא לפרסם אותו, ובוודאי לא לפני האור שמח, באשר חששו שאם יפרסם פירוש על חומש, יצא לו שם של תנ"כיסט, של איש עוסק במקרא בתנ"ך, ובאותה תקופה מי שעסק בתנ"ך לא ידע לעסוק גם בתלמוד וגם להפך, כך שהייתה זאת עצה נבונה של אביו להשאיר לעת עתה את המשך חוכמה. וכיוון דאידחי, משום שהדבר נדחה אז הוא נדחה, ואף על פי שכתב דמשך חוכמה בהיותו בערך בין 20 שנה, דבר שהוא פנומנלי לכשעצמו, הספר יצא לאור כמה חודשים אחרי שהוא נפטר. רבי שמחה היה ידוע בתקופתו בשם שר התורה. והשאלה שאנחנו שואלים, נתייחס אליה במשך כל השירים שלנו, היא כיצד זה קרה שהאדם הזה בדווינסק, רבי שמחה כהן, זכה לתואר שר התורה בתקופה של כל כך הרבה גדולי תורה. להזכיר את החפץ חיים, רב חיים עוזר גרז'ינסקי, רב שמעון שקופ, רב בורך בר, רב חיים סולובייצ'יק ועוד ועוד. בתקופה הזאת של זוהר של יהדות ליטא, במיוחד בין שתי מלחמות העולם, כיצד זה קרה שאותו אדם זכה פה אחד, כמו שאומרים, לתואר שר התורה. נראה לי לומר שהסיבה לכך היא גם פשוטה וגם עקרונית. יש 3 מרכיבים של לימוד תורה. המרכיב ההלכתי, המרכיב המחשבתי והמרכיב הפרשני. היו אז גדולים מאוד בלמדנות, בוודאי גם כן בדרגה של המשך חוכמה של רבי שמחה. היו גם גדולים במחשבה, במיוחד בעדה החסידית, שם שמואל וכדומה. אבל הוא היה היחיד שצירף בהרמוניה נפלאה גם את האלמנט ההלכתי עם המרכיב המחשבתי ועם המרכיב הפרשני הבנוי על עומק דקדוק לשון הקודש, כאשר כולם שימשו בהרמוניה אחת נפלאה בחיבור הידוע בשם משך חוכמה. הוא זה שהראה שהבנת הרמב"ם בהלכה קשורה בהבנת הרמב"ם במורה הנבוכים, והוא זה שהראה שעומק הבנת פסקי הלכה ומחשבת הלכה תלוי בעומק הבנת פשוטו של מקרא על פי דקדוק לשונות הקודש. לכן, אולי בגלל זה, הוא ורק הוא, באותה תקופה של זוהר, זכר בתואר הנכסף שר התורה. זה יהיה תפקידנו עכשיו במסגרת השיעורים, מדי שבוע בשבוע, לבחור בקטעים רפרזנטטיביים שמשמשו לנו דוגמה למלאכת המחשבת של גאון התורה, שר התורה, רב מאיר שמחה כהן מדווינסק.
Somebody want to fix the switch up? May I just pick it up? Thank you. Let's just do this. Let's go out of this. Let me get my discount key out. Okay. Let's see what it says. 1 second. Why doesn't it say how to get out? Oh. Mrs. Hirschman is a unique Talmidah of Rav Koopman. What's extraordinary is that Rav Koopman had many unique Talmidot. And as we began, we talked about the fact that in many ways your grandchildren or great-grandchildren of Rav Koopman, because your teachers, almost all of us, were either taught directly or taught indirectly, and certainly greatly influenced by Rav Koopman, and then you're the recipients. Some are great-grandchildren because it goes back even farther, and all these things come together. And the chance today to get to know Rav Koopman began with the limud from Rav Koopman, from the two shiurim that we saw. Began with Rav Bernstein's shiur as well, giving us a taste of what it means to talk about pshat and giving us a clear understanding of what pshat means. And without, as he told you, without the aval, as if pshat and other types of learning are in contradiction to each other. And now we have the opportunity to hear from one of his unique Talmidot, who you're also zocheh to have as your teacher as well. So we're very glad that Mrs. Hirschman is able to share her Torah with us.
Not that ambitious. Okay, it's a little overwhelming to be the representative Talmidah when Rav Koopman had so many thousands of Talmidot, many more accomplished and connected than I was, but so be it. I want to share with you today a shiur that I think will highlight one of the key teachings of Rav Copperman. It's one of his maybe most oft-quoted aphorisms. When he was nifter, we put together, I work on this journal a Torah journal for women, so we decided to do an issue for his shloshim. And I solicited from, the whole Machal alumni list, anyone who would write about Rav Copperman, reflections, thoughts, and I would say about 80% quoted this. Permeated, Torah should permeate your life and not just punctuate your life. And so this is the topic of this year. So first we'll do the Torah, and then I'll share with you some of my own personal reflections and how this message came alive for so many of us in our formative years. And like Rav Pollack said, it really transformed the way we live, the way we give over to our Talmidos. Many of your mothers learned here, or even grandmothers, I think, learned here. And it was really a fundamental switch in changing orientation from having Torah to be a compartmentalized part of your life to having Torah permeate your life. So I'll begin with a story of several years ago. A friend, she was actually not a Mechala alumna, but she could have been. She decided that she didn't have enough learning in her life because Baruch Hashem, we're busy with young children and all the things that are attendant to that. And she wanted to start a chabura, an evening once every other week for women to learn Mesilas Yesharim together. So this was exciting. So about 8 of us got together and we started going through Mesilas Yesharim. We couldn't do it every week because we were too busy with other things. Every other week. So we're moving on slowly through the Sefer, and we get up to this Parak Hey. So look on your sheets, source 1. And this is the first step. If you want to achieve anything at Avodas Hashem, so this is already after the Ramchal describes why you need Zehirus, and without Zehirus, you're like in nowhere, because if you can't pay attention to what's going on, then like how do you expect to get anywhere? And then he talks about the mafsidei hazehira. So why is this potentially hard for someone to reach? Okay, and remember, this is step 1. Without this, you don't go anywhere. Hine mafsidei hamida hazos marchikahem shlosha. So the first one, ha'echad hu tipul v'hatirda ha'olamis. So we're all looking around the table, like nodding at each other. We know that. We know what it means to be very involved in mundane pursuits. So kind of overwhelmed with the mundane tasks of life. Tipul v'hatirda ha'olamis. So that was a very familiar territory for us. Okay, the second, Schok halatzon, and the shlishi, chever ra. So we're not going to deal with those. We're going to deal with the first one. So he describes Tipul v'hatirda. כבר דיברנו מהם למעלה, כי בהיות האדם טרוד בענייני עולמו, הנה מחשבותיו אסורות בזיקי המעשה אשר עליהם. So what happens is when someone is too involved in worldly pursuits, he calls it like mental handcuffs, because your mind is not available to think about bigger things. You've heard about Maslow's triangle pyramid. So if you're worried about how we're going to have what to eat and how to make sure that you're safe, so you can't start thinking about theoretical, ideological concepts. You're not free to. So the ZK Hamas, they're handcuffs, mental handcuffs. So we're all nodding at each other because we know exactly what that means. Mirz Hashem, you'll get there, and you'll know what it means to always be flipping a pancake or changing a diaper or making a doctor's appointment or defrosting the freezer or doing the meat order or making a doctor's appointment. And sometimes even the juggle itself is hard to maintain. But what you have this year, the ability to reflect on what's my purpose in life. And how am I going to work on my midos? So you don't have the luxury when you're involved, when you have so much responsibility. So we're all nodding, at each other. Okay, so what is the Ramchal going to tell us? What's the advice? How do we fix this? Okay, so let's skip a drop. Right? He describes that you're not going to have makom, lo yanich lo makom el avodah. So you won't have a chance to, focus on the things that are important. And that's why nitztavinu l'kbo itin l'Torah. Okay, but we weren't, right? We're women. So we know the Mesilas Yesharim wasn't written for women, but it seems like the way you fix the problem of having too much involvement in Yonei Olam Hazeh is like bo itin l'Torah. Okay, so we're reading on, wondering what's going to be. And then he described Kfar zacharnu shehi hamitztareches yoter l'adam shegil zehirus. So you really need this to get to zehirus. You really need kviyas itin l'Torah, like Rabbi Pinchas says, Torah mevili de zehirus, right? It's like the prereq. Before you get to Zehirus, you have to have Torah. Without it, you're not going to get to Zehirus at all. And this is because Hashem created Yetzer Hara, and Torah is the tablet. So there's no escape. The only way to get past, the only way to get to Zehirus, the only way to climb that first step is Torah. Okay? V'zeh pashutu, she'im HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo bar lamaka zu, ela refuah zu, אי-אפשר בשום פנים שירפא האדם מזוס המכה בלתי זוס הרפואה. So there's no way around this. There's one makkah and there's one refuah. You have Yetzer Hara and you have Torah. So we're trying to think about, we're not mitzvah, so what could the substitute for Torah be? Because our lives don't really allow for kviyas itin l'Torah, and we don't really think the Ramchal intended this. But how do we think about this? So we floated all kinds of ideas. Maybe tefillah, what would you say? What's the replacement for Torah for women? Is there one? Maybe our husband's Torah, maybe tznius, because that's always the one that for some reason is like only applicable to women in lieu of everything else. No, we rejected all of these. It can't be, because he's talking about Torah being a cognitive anchor. This is something that keeps you like zehirus. Zehirus is a process. It's not like a schus that's going to be unconnected. The only way to remain zahir is to be constantly, anchored cognitively in Torah. Okay, so we're getting stuck. So what does he suggest? Okay, and very unequivocal language. There's no way to be saved except for this. If you think Misha Yachshov li Yinatzil Zilasa Eina Ela Torah, you're going to think you're going to do something else. No way. Without Torah, you can't get to Zehirus. We're all prone to attacks of the Yetzer Hara. If you don't take this Torah's refuah, like he says it a million times, very clear language, so we're all kind of stuck. What are we supposed to do? So he says, okay, what should you do? I'm looking for the line that I can't, maybe I didn't bring the whole paragraph here. But he says, so someone should be b'ma'it be'esek v'asok b'torah, which Chazal tell us you should minimize your engagement in a livelihood and asok b'torah. Okay, so now we're women sitting around the table. Like, what in the world does this mean for us? We're like, okay, I guess the kids won't have food. B'ma'it, they won't have food. They won't have clothing. We won't go shoe shopping. Like, what does that mean, b'ma'it be'esek, for a woman who's running a home? Like, that's not possible. So, we had to leave. Babies were crying. Babies just need to go home. We're like, okay, it's YomIyun. We don't know. What does this mean for a woman? What does it mean to have an anchor of Torah for a woman? Okay, so we left it. By the way, we all went home with homework. Like, talk to all of your teachers. Figure out if anyone learns Mesilas Yesharim, how to apply it to women. This is just a tangent. So I asked Rav Rudman, who teaches, or who taught, I don't know if he still does Mesilas Yesharim on Machal. He still teach? So he said, oh, yeah, sure. And then he sent me the Rav Yishal Salanter, who says very clearly, a woman is chayav to learn Musar, and Tikkun Amidos, and Cheshbon HaNefesh, just as much as a man. Adam, Chatzan Kegadol, Talmud Chacham Kama Aretz, Ish Keisha. So that was kind of his answer, that, of course, the woman has to spend time reflecting. And if she doesn't devote the time to reflecting, Rav Yishal Salanter says she's also going to fall into the trap of the Yetzer Hara. But I just want to leave this out as a question. If Torah is the only answer for the problem of tipul v'tirid ba'olam, and we are necessarily going to be overwhelmed, but very busy, involved in our responsibilities. So how does this work? What does that mean for a woman? Okay. The second is a Gemara that you're familiar with. It comes up in two places. This one is Bava Metzia. The other one is more often quoted. It's in Nedarim. But the Beis Halevi uses this one. It's a question of why was there Churban Beis HaMikdash. And the pasuk that's quoted is a pasuk from Yirmiyahu. Mi ha'isha chacham b'yavein azos asher diber pi Hashem elav yagida alma av haaretz. So we want to know who is the chacham who can understand this, who could explain to us why there was korban bayis. Davar ze amru chachamim v'lo pirshu. So the chachamim didn't have an answer. They couldn't answer why. Amru neviim v'lo pirshu. The neviim also couldn't figure out why was there korban bayis. So that's the continuation of the psukim there. So Hashem himself had to say it. No one else could figure it out. The Chachamim couldn't figure it out. The Nevi'im couldn't figure it out. Hashem says, Al azam es Torasi, which means what? They left my Torah. And then the pasuk continues, Asher lo hilchuba, and they didn't follow in its ways. So then, this is the famous part that you know. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, shelo berchu b'Torah tchila. So Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rav, explains this to mean that they didn't say Birchas HaTorah before they learned. And I'm sure you're familiar with this from Tisha B'Av Torah, but there are a lot of questions here. Like, the pasuk says, Al azvam es Torasi. They left my Torah. So, why is that Shelo Berchu Torah Tchila? And what is this concept of Shelo Berchu Torah Tchila? Why is that such a major infraction that would cause korban bayis? It's like, the answer is more problematic than the question. So the Ran in the Darim and Rashi here, kind of encapsulates it. He says the problem was that they didn't have enough chashivas for Torah. What does that mean, though? What does that mean? They didn't have enough chashivas for Torah. And also, an implied question here is, what was so difficult to figure out that you needed Hashem himself. The Chachamim couldn't figure it out, and the Nevi'im couldn't figure it out. If you have widespread problems of non-allegiance to Torah, people just defecting, so it's obvious, right? The Chachamim could figure it out, the Nevi'im could figure it out. Why over here do you need Hashem to tell us himself, Al-Azam Torasi? Sounds like it should have been a pretty obvious phenomenon. And that's what leads to the nuanced answer, Shelo Bercha Torah Tchila, but like it still needs to relate to the pasuk. Like we still need to have some way of understanding what is this? What does it mean? Okay, so to do that, we're gonna talk a little bit about the halachos of Birchas Torah. Basically, he has a phenomenal insight over here. Understands the Gemara and it totally, flips it on its head. But to get there, we need to understand a little bit. So, in the morning you say Birchas Torah. There are 3 parts of the bracha. First is Sher Kiddishanu, Mitzvos Avativanu, La'asok B'Divrei Torah. And the second part, which is most poskim understand it to be a continuation of the first bracha, is V'harevna. We ask Hashem to make it sweet for us. And then the third bracha is Asher B'char Banu, Mikol Ha'amim V'nosan Lanu Es Torasim. So these are the 3 components of Birchas Torah. And you know that we say this bracha how many times a day? Once, right? Only in the morning. You don't say it again. Once. Very good. You guys are doing great. So now let's understand why we say it only once a day. Now, other Birchos HaMitzvah, you say every time you do it. So we won't do it inside, but the Tosfos says in Brachos, he's talking about this, this idea of saying Birchos HaTorah only once a day. And he compares it to the mitzvah of Sukkah. Now, the mitzvah of Sukkah, you make a bracha, if you're Ashkenazi, and you make brachos on mitzvahs aseh shazman grama. You make a bracha, men always make the bracha, but whether you, as a woman, would make the bracha would be a question. But you go and you eat in the sukkah, you make a bracha. You leave the sukkah, you go take a chol hamoed tiyul, you come back for dinner, you make a new bracha. Why? Because there was a hefsek, like you stopped. It wasn't like one mitzvah the whole day. So the Tosfos explains the difference. So why would we not do this for Torah? Torah also, you go to class in the morning, you go out to do chesed, you come back to class later. You weren't learning when you were out to do chesed. You weren't learning when you were going to your doctor's appointment. So it's not one continuous, but it should be the same thing. You took a break, you came back, you make a new bracha. Why is it not so? So the Tosfos explains it's different because by Torah there's this chiyuv of v'higisa bo yomam v'layla, that you have to be involved in Torah all day and all night. And so it's different than Sukkah. Sukkah, the mitzvah is isolated. You go, you do a mitzvah. If there's a break, you come back, you do the mitzvah again. But it needs a new bracha. Torah is not like that. It's v'higisa bo yomam v'layla, and that's why you have one bracha in the morning, and then it lasts the whole day. Why sleeping at night, counts as a hefsek is a different story. But, it's your whole life, right? It's V'layla too. But that's called a hefsek. But if you sleep during the day, even if it's not possible to be learning, you sleep during the day, or the other example that the halacha brings is you go take a shower. Like, you can't be learning in the shower, and you can't be learning in your sleep. Although Rav Chaim Kanievsky does apparently make siyumim on things that he learns in his dreams, but most normal people don't, right? So you can't learn in your sleep, you can't learn when you're in the shower, but yet that's not even called a hefsek. Like you would think if it's impossible to be doing it, then at least that would be a hefsek, but no, b'gis yom v'layla, that makes it as if you don't say the bracha. So I'm not going to get into the sources here, but you have them if you're like the technical type and you want to look. There's a machlokas here between the Magen Avram and the Taz. The Shulchan Aruch says it like this, explains, based on this Tosfos, Kevan sheda'ato lachzor. Since his intention is to return to his learning, he doesn't make a new bracha. Okay, that's, Terse Shulchan Aruch. And then we have the voluminous commentary. So the Magen Avram says, and if his intention was not to return to his learning, then he would need a new bracha. And the Gra seemingly agrees with the Magen Avraham. But the Taz says, wait a second, look closely at the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't say im da'ato lachzor, which would mean if his intention is to return. He says kevan sheda'ato lachzor, which means, as your Hebrew, since his intention is to return. Since means that we're assuming that his intention is to return, and therefore he doesn't make a new bracha. The difference is, for the Magen Avraham says, and this seems to be like maybe the more pure version of what it should look like. Like if you don't have the Higis Ben V'layla on your head, and if you don't have the intention to return, all Chechos Brachos is based on Hesech Hadas. So if there's Hesech Hadas and you didn't intend to return, it's like eating. if you make a bracha in the morning and you plan on eating the whole day, that whatever it is, or your 2 hours of tiyol with your water bottle, so you don't make a new bracha. But if you had intention to stop, then you did a new bracha. It should be the same for Birchas HaTorah, says the Magen Avraham. But the Taz says no. Kevan means we just make this blanket assumption for everyone because we're all Jews with this obligation. He says it's an obligation that rests on us all the time, and since it's not an obligation to eat all day, but it's an obligation to learn Torah all day, whether or not you actually had in mind or whether you didn't have in mind, whether you thought you may have had hesach das, even if you were sleeping, kevan shadato lachzor, it doesn't count as a hefsek, one bracha for everyone. Okay, put that aside for a minute. Let's talk for a second about women saying Birchas HaTorah. Did you get to this year? You usually do a little bit about it, right? So there are several opinions as to why a woman, the Shulchan Aruch just says categorically women say Birchas HaTorah. It's problematic because women are not obligated. This is very clear, right? Whether you have schar for your learning, or whether it's a good thing to do, of course. But whether there's a tzivoy, there's no tzivoy. And the machlokes between the Ashkenazi psak and the Sephardi psak of whether a woman says a bracha on a mitzvah that she's not mitzvah in. So this is all mitzvahs aseh shazman grama. The Ashkenazi women say a bracha. The Sephardi women don't say a bracha. The machlokes is rooted in this concept of how could you say asher kiddishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu if there was no tzivoy. So the Ashkenazi approach, it's the machlokes, the Mechaber and the Ramah, and the Ramah says no, it's like v'tzivanu is a global v'tzivanu. It's like everyone is v'tzivanu. We're part of the nation, so we're all also v'tzivanu, even though it might not have applied to me in particular. Whereas the Mechaber says no, how could you say asher tzivanu? We're not. There's no tzivanu here. But yet, Birchas HaTorah is fascinating because the Mechaber is the one who says women are chayav with no explanation to say the bracha. You would think, and all the Ashkenazi poskim who handle this question of what is the source of a chiyuv for women, they end up coming back to saying there is no chiyuv for women proper to learn Torah, but they say brachas anyway, like they say it on Lulav and they say it on Sukkah and they say it on Megillah and all the things that they're not mitzvah, and you still say bracha because you say a bracha even if you're not mitzvah. But it's a problem for the Mechaber. What's his source? No one knows. So there's a whole discussion and tumult in the poskim. It's actually a very complicated question because even the answers that are suggested, which you know, right? Tell me what they are. Why are women chayav? Why do we say Birchas HaTorah? Because what? You have to learn the dinim that are shaykh to them. Anything else? There was one other one that might have floated by you. Yeah. Oh, that's a separate question, right? We'll get to that in a second, right? The other explanation of offering why we say the bracha of Asher Kiddishanu Mitzvosav Tzivanu is that they're chayiv to say the parsha of Korbanos in the davening, and since you have to say something that's Torah, so you say Asher Kiddishanu Mitzvosav Tzivanu. Now, the Minchas Chinuch, which I also brought for you, well, before that, the Gra relates to both of these, and he says they're really dachui. He says they don't rise to the level of chiyuv, neither one. The fact that you need to daven and learn, so I need to daven, but I don't need to learn. The bracha is Asher Kiddishanu B'mitzvosav Tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. It's not that I should. And when you need to know the halachos, you need to learn the halachos. The mitzvah is not to learn. The mitzvah is to know the halachos. The mitzvah is to do the mitzvos. So it's never rises to the level of a chiyuv to learn. So the Gra says this can't be, and he's Ashkenazi. He falls back on women say the bracha because we say the bracha on all things that we're not mitzvah in. But I want to get back to this other point that you mentioned. So the Minchas Chinuch addresses this question, and he really leaves this YomIyun. He says, maybe you could say by the other parts of Birchas HaTorah, Asher Bachar Banu, that's either a bracha of, you could categorize as a bracha of Shevach or a bracha of Ne'anin. So when Hashem gives us a gift, we need to thank Him for it, like Birchos HaMazon. So fine, women should say it just like Ben should, as long as they're learning. So the Torah itself needs a bracha. It's not me who's chayav in it, but the Torah itself needs a bracha. As soon as you're going to open the Torah, you're going to say Asher Bachar Banu because you have to thank Hashem for the gift. That's a bracha of Shevach, or a bracha of Ne'anin, however you look at it. But the first bracha, the Minchas Chinuch is like, he's stuck. He says, how could you say Asher Kiddishanu Mitzvosav Tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah when there's no chiyuv of a woman to learn? So these are, and then that's one question. And now let's come back to our other halachic discussion of saying the bracha once a day. What did we say the justification was? Why do we say it only once a day? Because we say there's no hesech hadas. Why is there no hesech hadas? Because v'gisa b'yom v'layla. Okay. Are women chayim in v'gisa b'yom v'layla? Maybe karbanos, maybe they need to learn what applies to them, but no one, even, even those women who are learning Gemara all day, will tell you that there's a chiyuv of a woman to be osek b'torah yom v'layla. So how can this justification apply to women? And this is the Ztzl's question. The Ztzl is the nose of Yehuda. You may have heard of him in the 1700s in Prague. He was a gadol ador of his time. And he says if he wasn't scared, he'd say chiddush. He would say, like, a woman really should say the bracha every time. Like, let's say, he gives the example. Let's say in the morning she davens, she said the bracha and she davens, and then later in the day, which is really insightful, like in 1700s, this might have been happening. Later in the day, she picked up a chumash to learn. And if she was going to learn Eizah Mikra or something, she would need a new bracha. So he says, like, if he wasn't scared, he'd say the chiddush, but he never saw any hint to it in the poskim before him, so he won't say it. But we're left with the question, because it really is a very compelling question of, well, first of all, what's the justification for a woman to say the bracha at all if there's no chiyuv to learn? That's separate. And the Ztzl's question, a very compelling question, if the whole reason we say Birchas HaTorah only once a day is because we assume there's no hesach hadas, because there's this chiyuv of you can't say that for a woman. No one is going to say that for a woman. So why do we only say it once a day? We should say more than once a day. Okay? Hang on to your questions. To these questions. Okay, so I'll tell you where I'm in the sources now. We just did everything until 7. That was the Ztzl. Okay, now let's get to the Beis Halevi. On source 8 over here. So he's going to explain for us this Gemara in Nedarim and in Bava Metzia. Why was there? What does it mean that al azmas Torasi there was Churban Beis Hamikdash because shelo bercha Torah tchila? So this is in context of the discussion. He wants to know why the verb shamar is used with Torah. We say shmiras haTorah, shmiras hamitzvos. When you think of it, we're so used to saying it, we don't think about it. But it's a strange verb. You would. If I would ask you what verb you would choose, what would you say? Asiya, right? We do the mitzvos. What does it mean, shmira? And even today we say shomer Torah mitzvos. What does it mean, shomer? So he draws an analogy to truma, which requires shmira. This is like classic Beis Halevi. This is typical. I'll take a halacha concept and expand it hashkafically. So halachically, for truma to be kosher, the din of shmira by truma means that someone had to be watching it the whole time. There had to be no hesech hadas. Now, by chulin, if someone wanted to make sure his chulin was tahor, then he didn't have to watch it the whole time. As long as he didn't know something happened that would make it tameh, it was called tahor. But for truma, the kedusha is on a different level, and so the din is different. The din is, as soon as there was a lapse in consciousness that it wasn't being washed, we assume it's pasul. So he says this is the din of shmira. Shmira means that we assume that there's going to be some kind of kilkul, some kind of corruption, some kind of tumah, if there's hesech hadas. And then beautifully he takes this concept of Torah. He says, really, this is what shmira is Torah, v'shamra is Torah. See, this is what it means when Hashem is demanding shmira for Torah. He's saying no hesech hadas. If you have hesech hadas from your Torah, then you could assume it's pasul. And this is true if you notice all of our midos work. If it's in your consciousness somewhere, if it's part of your cheshbon somehow, you're moving ahead. And once it's not part of your consciousness, then there are lapses. This is the nature of things. The Yetzer Hara is very active. So if we're not counteracting it, so we're always going to end up slipping. That's why Shmiras Torah means no hesech hadas. And then he asks, how is that possible? No hesech hadas? He says, you need to earn a parnasa. You need to be involved in daily things. How is it possible to have no hesech hadas? If you're going to define it narrowly, it's impossible. So he offers 2 models. The first model, I'm not going to talk about today, is the Yisachar Zvulun model of no hesech hadas. It's beautiful what he does there with it. But the second one, which he says it's the real answer that's applicable, really, even to the Zvulun who's supporting the Yisachar and he's having his no hesech hadas vicariously. Even for that person, this would apply. And certainly for someone who's not involved in that kind of engagement. So he says, and you could look along here in the underlined part of the Beis Halevi, V'zos Toras Adam Hameuleh Hakovei Itim LaTorah Laval Yasich Datu MiToraso. So what should someone do if he doesn't want to have hesech hadas from his Torah? V'gam be'es isku b'tzorach parnasaso yeh daito leman yuchal asok b'torah tekaf achar ha'esek v'lachzor l'limudo. So one condition is that while he's doing whatever else he's doing, he should have this kevan shadaito lachzor mentality. He's intending to get back to his learning. He can't wait to close up the store and get back to his Gemara. That's one way of thinking for the person who's not going to have hesed chadash from his learning. And then v'gam be'es isko b'parnasa yizbonin tadir b'chol mashu oseh im lo al pi Torah im ein bo iser gezel o ona v'chadoma v'nimtzeh v'gam az dato la Torah. And what about the time where he's actually involved in his livelihood? How is he have no hesed chadash from Torah? Because everything's being passed through his prism. He's wearing Torah glasses all the time. Am I doing? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this gezel? Is this ona? Is this the way I'm supposed to be nohig in business? So one part is not having chayas hardas from the Torah learning. I'm going to get back to it, and the other part is analyzing all of my actions and all of my speech and all of my deeds and even all of my thoughts through the prism of this is what the Torah wants from me. And in that way, the Torah never leaves him, because even though he might be doing something else, he's not involved in learning. He's involved in Torah. His mind is making sure that the Torah is permeating his life. So now what he says, it's amazing what he says, explains what does it mean shelo bercha Torah tchila. So he brings this halachic discussion we mentioned. The Magen Avram says that if you have hesed chadash from your learning, you have to say the bracha again. Okay, the Taz says no, but he says according to this opinion, which is really he says me'ikar hadin, this is the halacha. The Gra also says me'ikar hadin, this is the halacha, but if brachas lahakel will rely on the Taz, but me'ikar hadin, if there's hesed chadash, you need a new bracha. That's the halacha in all brachos, in all hilchos brachos. If there's hesed chadash, you need a new bracha. He says the problem in this generation of the Churban, it looked beautiful from the outside. They got up in the morning, they had the daf yomi shir, they went to work the fields or the shoemaker shop or the tailor or whatever it is they did from 9 to 5, and they even came back at night and learned. The problem was that from 9 to 5, they had total hesed chadash from the Torah. And when they came back at 5 o'clock to learn, they needed a new bracha, and they didn't say it. So he explained the problem was not that they didn't say Birchas Torah. The problem was that they needed to say Birchas Torah. It was a symptom. The symptom was that they had hesed chadash from their learning. This is why the Chachamim couldn't figure it out and the Vim couldn't figure it out, because on the outside, it looked beautiful. They learned in the morning, they learned at night. They engaged in their livelihood during the day, right? The learner. What was the problem? While he was learning, his head was away from Torah. And that's why it fits with the pasuk, al azam es torasi. For that chunk of time, whenever they were involved in other things, they left my Torah. When Torah is compartmentalized, and there's hesed chadas, and it doesn't permeate one's life, that's azam es torasi. They left my Torah. Torah needs shmira. If there's no shmira, there's kilkul. And that's what led to v'lo hilchuba. Right? This is the beginning of this. That's not the end of the story. The beginning of the story is when you have hesed chadas from Torah, then you can expect that there will be kilkul. And then you'll stop living by Torah. The only way to make sure that there's shmira, that the Torah is preserved, is no hesed chadas. Okay, so now I want to talk about this concept of la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're going to give a hashkafic answer to these halachic questions. So I think, if you think about it, what's the terminology? We say asher kiddeshanu mitzvos v'tzivanu, la'asok. What do we really mean by la'asok? And the poskim say la'asok doesn't mean la'asok; it means lilmod. But that's not the bracha. The bracha is la'asok. What does la'asok mean? To be busy with. An esek is a business. So what we're saying, and this makes a lot of sense if you think about the concept of no hesed chadas, and you have to have it, we say the bracha only once a day because we expect to be thinking about getting back to Torah, involved in it all the time. It's an esek. It's what's occupying us. It's an occupation. It's an esek. It's a business. La'asok means to be busy with, to toil in, to have a constant involvement in. La'asok b'divrei Torah. So I want to read to you what Rav Soloveitchik said at one of at a siyum, and then we're going to apply it back to women. So he first quotes the bracha: Baruch atah Hashem asher kiddushanu b'tzvos v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Torah is not to be studied, but demands an all-encompassing involvement. La'asok b'divrei Torah. The Tosfos, which I mentioned to you, asks why the bracha for Torah recited once in the morning suffices for each time one learns during the day, no matter how many interruptions have taken place. while the bracha for sukkah, residing in the sukkah, must be recited anew each time one returns to the sukkah after leaving it. They answer that since the obligation of Talmud Torah is continuous, v'yigisa b'yom v'layla, one is always conscious of the mitzvah. However, any discontinuity of awareness, hadas, relating to the mitzvah of sukkah, effectively requires that a new bracha be recited each time the observance of the mitzvah is terminated, and then subsequently renewed. Apparently, there are two kinds of awareness, according to Tosfos. First is an acute awareness. Clearly, this is lacking when one thinks about other matters. The second is a latent awareness, and this awareness is still present even though one is engaged in other matters. When a mother plays with her child, there's an acute awareness of the child. But even when the mother works at a job or is distracted by some other activity, there is a natural latent awareness of her child's existence. This latent awareness remains throughout her entire lifetime and can never be extinguished. This is why your mothers text you and email you 20 times a day, because you might be far away, but she's thinking about you. It is expressed in commitment, devotion, and a feeling of identification, a feeling that I and the baby are one. The infant is the center of gravity of the parents' lives. They feel they cannot live without their child. The same is true with regard to Torah. There may not be an acute awareness of Torah for 24 hours each day, but the latent awareness never ceases. The injunction which forbids discontinuity of awareness from Torah is measured in terms of pen yasuru milavavcha. Okay, so that's a pasuk in Dvarim, that you shouldn't remove it from your lavavcha, your heart. Not in terms of pen yasuru mililmod, that you should stop learning, lest you stop learning. No, lest you stop living it in your heart. All the injunctions against hesed hadas from Torah do not refer to discontinuity of acute awareness. Rather, they refer to discontinuity of latent awareness, which, as already mentioned, is expressed in commitment, devotion, and self-identification with Torah. When even the latent awareness, the commitment to Torah, is forgotten and dismissed from mind, then one is mischayiv benafsho. This is referring to the Mishnah in Avos that says, "Kol haposek milimudo mischayiv benafsho." This hesed hadas is talking about when you remove it from your heart, not when you stop learning. This is the reason we say la'asok b'divrei Torah. La'asok implies that even when we're mentally involved with something else, we're aware of Torah. This awareness of Torah should become part of one's I awareness, just as I am always aware of my existence without having to walk around saying, I exist. So should I be aware of Torah. If the blessing were lilmod Torah and related only to the cognitive act, then any hesed hadas would require the bracha be recited every time Torah studies commenced anew, just like the bracha for sukkah. V'higisa refers not to the actual study of Torah, listen to this, it's so beautiful, but to the mitzvah of latent awareness of Torah. That's the whole reason why, v'higisa b'yom v'layla, that's a justification for saying the bracha once a day. Higayon does not refer to thinking in the sense of intellectual detached thought, rather it refers to awareness of personal desires, wishes, and concerns. It refers to a deeply felt longing and questing, as in v'hegyon libi, when you say at the end of tefillah, the thoughts of my heart. Thoughts of my heart are very different than the thoughts of my head. No matter how much involved one is in other matters, there should always be awareness and appreciation of Torah as the highest value. And then he goes on to talk about the Siyam text, about when we say I should never leave the Torah should never leave me, I should never be forgotten from the Torah should never be forgotten from me, that there's this constant connection through this latent awareness that continues. That even when you close the Masechta, whatever it is, they finish Masechta Nadarim, you close the Masechta, but Nadarim is with me through the rest of my life. So I submit that for a woman, the mitzvah of esek b'Torah, and the way Rav Soloveitchik is describing here, is the same as for a man. Her mitzvah of limud is different. You can't argue with that, right? She doesn't have a chiyuv of lilmod Torah, but she has a chiyuv of lasok b'Torah. The obligation to make Torah your esek, to be involved in it in the way of commitment and devotion, and putting everything through that prism of Torah, having Torah permeate your life and not just punctuate your life, that's a chiyuv for a woman as much as it is for a man. In fact, it's our mandate, as Am Segula, the Mechilta explains, V'yisem li segula mikol amim, that you should be pnuyim li, ve'oskim b'divrei Torah, involve yourself in divrei Torah. Am Segula is not just for the men, it's for the women too. To be part of the Am Segula, Hashem's treasured nation, you need to have an esek in Torah. No hesed hadas means that it doesn't leave my consciousness. Okay. So now I want to talk a drop about about Rav Copperman and reflections as a Talmidah. So, I think if I would identify what changed for most of us in our time in Michlala, it would be this: that before we came, at least many of us then, it's more Beis Yaakov now, but many of us came from more modern backgrounds. I came from Hafter. You know what that is? I had 8 girls from Hafter in my Michlala class. 8. There were girls from Flatbush, there were girls from Ramaz, there were girls from Frisch. And what really changed for us was Torah stopped being something that you did or you didn't do, right? But those were like, the punctuation marks, like you're living your life. Punctuated also has another meaning. You're living your life, and there's a comma here, stop Shabbos. There's a period here, stop. There's a mitzvah of sukkah. There's some kind of tznius rule that you need to keep your knees covered in shul only. But it was a punctuation. Like that was what the paragraph was about something else. Like the life was about something else. But Torah was just like kind of the punctuation. You need a colon here. Don't forget the quotation marks. You have something. Look for the kasha symbol when you're shopping. But it wasn't anything about our life. The text was different, and that's really what changed. We saw it like, wait a minute. Like Hashem gave us this Torah to be part of our lives, to instruct our lives. This is what our lives are supposed to be about. La'asok b'divrei Torah. And you couldn't help but, the videos really, these tiny clips they do something, but they don't give you a sense of the majesty of Rav Copperman. It's so hard to describe. He would, you couldn't experience his shiur and not be drawn to Torah. It wasn't like he lectured to us about making sure that you're always thinking about Torah and make Torah part of your life. And he made Torah so appealing to us and so delightful. The study of Torah was so delightful, and his regal nature and the way he related to people. You just wanted to be like him. You just wanted to live that life. Everyone talks about his music, the way he related to the symphony of Torah. He would always speak about the symphony of Torah. And that's really what his shiur was like. It was like listening to a symphony with the pauses at the right spot, the humor at the right place, the history, the glosses on, the current situation. He fit everything into the hour. With just, you were left with the feeling of the majesty of Torah. Torah covers everything. It was, and the way he related to people. I'll tell you a really funny story. I was once we had a rotation, and we were able to be guests in the Copperman's home. And I went with a whole bunch of girls once. It was 8 girls at a time. The Rabbanit would cook for us. And so there was one girl who was like, a little inappropriate, I guess. She still is. Some things don't change. But I actually reminds her about the story. She had no recollection. So, we had assistentio to help us with our assignments or other ways. We're eating at Rav Copperman's house for a Shabbos meal. Okay? Everyone's like on their best behavior, proper, like not moving, being very careful with your words. He would give us the Torah that we had to say. We had to prepare in advance, and he would prepare the whole week for his Torah at Rav Copperman's table. But this girl, she's like, Rav Copperman, do you know Chulin? And we're all like, where's she going with this? And he's like, how can I help you? Did I miss a beat? How can I help you? She's like, do you have a chulin here? So he says, yes, sure, that's a shas. She took her chair. She went to the bookshelf. She stood on the chair. She took down the chulin, like the Shabbos table. She just plopped it down in front. And we all didn't know whether we should bury ourselves, but the respect, not a smirk. How can I help you? And she wanted some help on understanding something for an assignment, but it was just the majesty of just, relating to other people with such respect. And when I collected all these stories, and I'm so happy, if anyone wants, I can email this to you. This was the journal that we put together with reflections of a lot of different Talmidot, which will give you really a sense of his, of Rav Copperman's legacy and how everyone was impacted in their own personal way. What else did I want to share with you? A personal story. So I struggled when I was in Mechala between my decision of what I was going to do the subsequent year. So again, I told you I come from a modern background. The Avodah Zarah over there was secular education, so you needed to go to an Ivy League school. And from the time I was 2, this was on my crib. So I was supposed to go to Yale, but I had religious crisis over this, because what frum girl goes to Yale? Like, what is that? So I spoke to Rav Copperman about it. He was also very accessible to us. He was very, heavily thinking, and very like a frown on his face the whole time as I'm discussing this, possibility. Clearly not happy about the prospect. And then I said, but I made arrangements for myself. I'm going to be a dorm counselor. There's a girls' high school in New Haven, and I arranged I'm going to be a madricha there. He says, "Bazeni chamtani." He says, "It'll be okay." And I'm looking back at it, in the context of this permeated, not punctuated. Like, if your life is going to be something else, your life is going to be in the Torah Miskeret, and you go to school, your life can be punctuated with other things, but it has to be permeated with Torah. So I want to end with a shtickle Torah from. It's not really a shtickle Torah; it's a story about the Meshech Chachma, and this will tie into the love of Torah that Rav Copperman transmitted to us, and how this really leads to a life of no hesek hadas from Torah, of esek b'Torah. So apparently, the story was told over by Rabbi Backstrom Cleveland. That's where I saw the source for the story, but it's well known. So Rabbi Simcha and his chavrusa would learn together, and if they would get stuck on a problem, and stuck probably meant 3 hours of working at it and still feeling stuck. So he would tell his chavrusa, "Okay, you go to that corner of the Beis Medrash, and I'm going to go to this corner of the Beis Medrash, and we're going to daven for Ahavas HaTorah." And they did, and they come back, and so the chavrusa says, "Rabbi Simcha, I just have to ask you, if we're ready davening, let's daven for the answer. Let's daven for the resolution that we're stuck. Well, why are we davening for Ahavas HaTorah?" So he says, "Let me explain something to you. A mother has a newborn baby. She needs to go run an errand. She leaves the baby with a neighbor, with all the instructions. When the baby needs to nap, She comes back, the baby's screaming. The neighbor can't calm the baby down. What happens? The mother takes the baby. What happens? Quiet. Why? Nothing changed, right? Why? So he said, the child feels the mother's love. The love that the child feels, it makes the child calm, knowing that his needs are going to be taken care of. My mother is going to know what I need, and she's going to be able to figure it out. He says, we're davening for Ahavas HaTorah because if we really love the Torah, we would know what the Torah wants from us. We'd be able to figure it out. It's like a prophylactic solution. When you daven for Ahavas HaTorah, when you love Torah, then you understand Torah. You know what the Torah understands you. You know what you need from Torah. You're able to understand Torah better. And through the love that Rav Copperman transmitted to us through his teaching and through his living, I think we all walked away with a feeling of love for Torah and the majesty and the just the beauty of living a Torah life. And everything that you learn is really in his chus. He used to say, the highest form of compliment, which I thought I was the only one to get this compliment, but I've discovered that many people got this compliment. So I had like a buddy in Mechala. We did everything together. And we would go to all the classes together. We would sit right up front. We were like Rav Copperman groupies. And we're still very close. And one time we were skipping out of class together. We bumped into Rav Copperman. I remember exactly where it was, right outside the path by the school building. And he turns to us with a twinkle in his eye, and he says, they're going to ask me, Copperman, what did you do in Tafshin Nun Ches? And I'm going to say, what do you mean? I had Friedman and Reich in the Mechala. That's what I did. So Achar Mei Esrim, there are thousands upon thousands, not just Friedmans and Reichs, but Rothmans and Pfennigs and all of you, and Ritz Hashem L'Dorei Doros, it should be an Ilui Neshama.
The Chizuk of a day of spirituality. Mr. Avichayil or Mrs. Avichayil left food for you there still. So if you need trouble walking up to the Chadar Ochel after you finish, then you can have an extra boost of stuff. Tila, we began by saying that I'm going to tell them about their grandfather, because they learned Torah from people who learned from Rav Copperman. And Banecha are Talmidim, and the pasuk says, "My grandchildren are also," so they're also Talmidim. So they're also Talmidim. But if you raised your eyebrows saying everybody's grandchildren and stuff like that, so when we hear from Tila now, we don't have to raise our eyebrows in terms of being a grandchild. But she has the perspective of not only being a grandchild. You're the Bechorah, right? You're the oldest. She's the oldest of the grandchildren. So she, They're boys. She's what counts, but we know that, right? And also a bit of a Talmidah. And it's not just something which is objective and far away that we're intellectualizing, but for all of us here, it's very, very personal. So there's no better way to conclude the YomIyun by hearing something which is very personal, and that we're all zocher to share in that personal part, at least in a little bit. Function.
Okay. Well, everyone who spoke here before me today called Rav Copperman Harav. I was zochet to call him Saba. One of the greatest matnos chinam that Hashem has blessed me with is that I had the schus of having Saba Copperman as my Saba. It's an honor and responsibility to be his granddaughter. It's something that when I was younger I took for granted, but as I matured, I learned to appreciate the tremendous gift that it is. It's hard to believe that it's been 3 years since that fateful Monday afternoon when he passed away at Yarzheit Hospital, surrounded by all of us. He's still so much a part of my life, and I think about him constantly. I find myself asking myself all the time, what would Saba say or do in this situation? How would he answer this particular student? And when I think about Saba, my mind automatically switches to Savta, because I know that without Savta, Saba would have never been able to accomplish what he had. To me, they were and still are a unit. And when I go to the Beis HaChayim about once a week to talk to them and daven to Hashem in their schus, I'm overcome all over again with the responsibility that I have to perpetuate their legacy. What was that legacy? Who was this couple? Since recently it was Saba's Yarzheit, I'll focus on him more and dedicate my words le'ilu nishmaso. But as Saba always told his students, Sheli v'shelachem shelahi. Nothing would have happened without Savta. There are scores of people out there who can speak to you about Saba's greatness in Torah and his many accomplishments in the world of Chinuch Habanos and Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. But to me, he was first and foremost Saba. Before teacher, mechanech, and menahel. Yes, he was my teacher and mechanech too, but not just in the classrooms here at Mechala. My education started when I was much younger. One of the earliest child memories I have of Saba is of walking around the Mechala campus holding his hand. I knew very well that Saba was the big boss and that everyone in Mechala worked for him. And I was very proud to be seen with him. I will never forget that it took us several minutes to walk to the school building from his apartment, because on the way he stopped to talk to every worker, to say hello and ask them if they're okay and if they're drinking enough, and to remind them that if there's anything that they need, they shouldn't hesitate to approach him. I remember talking to the gardener, the maintenance guy, the electrician. Obviously, Saba was on first-name basis with them all and greeted them with a smile and a friendly pat on the arm. I can see that the workers absolutely adored him. As a child, this was fascinating to me. Here was a really important man with many workers, and he treats them with such love and respect. He would go to their simchas as well and always inquire about the well-being of their families. Saba did not consider it beneath himself to make a chavrusa with some of the maintenance staff. In one case, he had a chavrusa for over 10 years with one of the workers. This worker would tuck his sefer under his arm and proudly tell everyone, Ani holech lilmod im harav. Saba was a kind, gentle man with a twinkle in his eye and a fantastic, witty Irish sense of humor. Just a short example. I don't know if anybody said this is like one really famous one. Did they say the one with the long shaitel? So one of the students got married, and she came to visit Rav Copperman with her husband, and she's wearing this really, really, really long shaitel. So Saba says to her, Eilu devarim she'en lahem shi'ur ha'pe'ah. He winked at her, and she got the message. He loved spoiling us grandchildren, buying us gifts when he went abroad and spending as much time as possible with us. But he was also a man that commanded respect in a very quiet way. We all just knew that at Saba Savta Shabbos table, there is no horsing around. You sit like a mensch, you come to the meal with a Dvar Torah prepared, no matter how old you are. Saba always preferred that we prepare Dvar Torah ourselves and not say something that we learned in school. I still remember preparing a really long Rabbeinu B'chaya when I was in 5th grade to say at the Shabbos Yudah. He wanted us to learn how to learn independently, and we did him proud. And many years later, when I was already married with my own family and living in Yerushalayim, Saba and Savta came to us for Shabbos a couple of times. And my kids, who are Baruch Hashem young and fun and sometimes even wild, were angels that Shabbos. They too realized that when Saba and Savta are around, there's a certain appropriate behavior that's expected without even being spoken to about it. I can't say they prepared Divrei Torah, but at least they behaved. For my bas mitzvah, Saba and Savta bought me a beautiful set of Mikros Gedolos Chumashim. My friends literally laughed at me and mocked me because they all thought I was actually really funny, since all of them got gifts like jewelry and like cool electronic gadgets and stuff. But I'll tell you one thing. I have those chumashim till today. They're in my house. That's where I prepare my lessons with. The pages are worn out. They're underlined. They're torn. And I could bet you that all of that jewelry and electronics that my friends got, it's probably, I'm guessing, mostly gone by now. But I still have my chumashim. Saba and Savta taught us what's important and what's not, what's long-lasting and valuable and what isn't. My mom followed in their footsteps, and 2 years ago when my daughter turned bas mitzvah, she bought her a set of Mikras Gedolos Chumashim and a set of Nach. I hope to Mirz Hashem follow this Mesorah as well. Saba was not just a Talmid Chacham and a Baal Eitzah, but he was very down-to-earth as well and extremely humble. I remember how they always had tons of guests on Shabbos, whether it was family, friends, or Mechala girls. On Matzei Shabbos, Saba would roll up his sleeves and go help Savta in the kitchen with a pile of dishes waiting in the sink. He would wash and she would dry. And they would sing together as they cleaned up. He was alto, she was soprano, and their harmony was perfect. Speaking of Kedma, they'd be proud. Okay, they sang stunning, stunning, beautiful. But their harmony wasn't just perfect in their song. There was harmony in their home. There was a wholesomeness and peacefulness to their home that you felt when you walked in there. Saba and Savta loved and respected each other, and they each put the other one's needs before their own. They were a living example to me of what Chazal teach us. Ish ve'isha zechu, shchina b'neihem. He was ahava kegufo, umechabda yoser migufo. His love and caring for her was reciprocated tenfold. For example, Savta knew that Saba needs to rest every day. He suffered from heart condition and from diabetes. So he really needed to rest, and he had a tremendously pressured life. But he sometimes got caught up in the day's work and the many responsibilities that came with being the Rosh HaMechala, and didn't allow himself a break. She would then walk to the school building, walk in on the meeting that he was having, and announce to everybody sitting there that her husband has to go lie down now, and that the meeting will continue later. Saba's health was a priority to her, and she didn't let him neglect it. She also made sure that they went on short mini vacations a couple times a year so he could recharge his batteries. She insisted to do whatever she can to lighten his responsibilities at home so he can dedicate himself to Mechala and to his learning and his students. The harmony in their marriage extended even to when Savta was very sick. In the last years of her life, Savta suffered from Alzheimer's. He was there with her, talking to her, holding her hand, taking walks with her, and giving her comfort. During one of her last hospitalizations, I was with her, and Saba came to visit. She was totally out and didn't seem to hear anything around her. But when I told her that Saba was there and he started talking to her, she started to smile. He was the only one she recognized till her very last day. If I had to think of one midah that Saba represented to me more than any others, it's the midah of Hakaras Hatov. That was his very essence. His name was Yehuda. Hapa'am Odeh Es Hashem. That's what Saba's life was all about. Whenever I asked Saba, how are you? His answer would always be, Hodu Lashem Kitov. When I would ask Savta the same question, her response was, Ma'ashiv Lashem. They never took anything for granted and always relayed everything back to its source. It's no coincidence that the song they walked down to at my wedding was Ma'ashiv Lashem. It was very important to Saba that his family learn the lesson of Hakaras Hatov, and the family song that Saba would sing at every family get-together was a three-word song, the Olam Hashem Modeka, a song which Dr. Rosenwasser will teach you at the end of the year. He would stand up, look around his beautiful family, close his eyes, and start to sing Le'olam Hashem Odeka. It's just 3 words. It has a low, a medium, and a high. She'll teach it to your Hashem. And the whole family would sing. It's a sight I'll never forget. With that simple song, he taught us so much. I remember several years back, Saba was honored by the mayor of Yerushalayim, and he received an award called Pras Yakir Yerushalayim. This award is given to a few individuals each year who have made a significant impact on the city of Yerushalayim in different areas. I remember the beautiful ceremony in the Ir David Arena. It was a beautiful July evening. Saba was the only Frum honoree that year, and he was chosen by the mayor to speak on behalf of all the other honorees. What he said that night will remain with me for a long time. He got up and told the audience that when his family and friends heard that he was being honored, they told him, Yehuda, you deserve this. You worked so hard for this award. And Saba said to everyone, in the Lashon HaKodesh dictionary, there is no such concept as I deserve. Saba would know. He was an expert in Lashon HaKodesh. There's no such word in Lashon HaKodesh as Magia li, I deserve. Whatever Hashem has chosen to give me is a gift. And this, he's talking, girls, to a lot of secular people. He was the only Frum honoree, so there's hundreds of people there, and that was his message to them. We don't deserve anything. Everything that Hashem gives us is a gift. I remember my oldest son was turning bar mitzvah. We invited Saba to the Anachas Tefillin at the Kotel. Saba was glowing and thanked Hashem profusely for the schus of attending his great-grandson's Hanachas Tefillin. Saba's own father had passed away when he was 11 and wasn't zochet to be at his bar mitzvah. His hakaras hatov was not only to Hashem, but to everyone around him. Every Sukkot and Pesach, we would have him over for Chol Hamoed Tzida at our home, which was the highlight of our Yantif. My husband would always drive him home afterwards, and a few minutes later, I would get a phone call with Saba on the line. Thank you so much for having me. You gave me such nachas. Your husband and children are beautiful. The food was delicious. I, of course, should have been the one calling him to thank him for coming, but of course, he beat me to it. Saba was never too busy to pick up the phone and call people just to say hi and make someone feel cared for. He would call all his siblings and siblings-in-law every week to make sure they were okay. That is all in between writing his svarim and running Mechala. Last year, the Mishpacha magazine ran an article on Saba, a beautiful article. And the following week, I checked the inbox, and this is what I found. Thank you for your timely and moving article on Rav Yehuda Copperman Ztzl. He was without a doubt the single most significant influence on the most important decisions I made at the cusp of my adulthood, after my 1-year stay in Machal 47 years ago. The kind of person I would marry, the values in the family I hope to raise, the decision to make my home in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Copperman, besides showing us the depth and complexity of Limudei Tanakh, trusted us, his students, to master the intellectual challenge he set for us. What's more, we felt his expectation that each of us was capable of attaining the highest level of character and nobility of Mido. How could we disappoint him? After Mechala held an alumni reunion attended by thousands of former students, I wrote a letter to Rav Copperman telling him how deeply the experience of that 1 year had affected me. I recalled a highlight of that year when 2 busloads of students were stranded in the Sinai desert for 28 hours, decades before cell phones, and the Rav sang for us and gave a shiur as we waited for the army truck to pull us out. Don't tell your parents about this. Several weeks later, when I was sitting preoccupied in my study, my daughter came in to tell me someone was on the phone for me. I asked her to find out who's calling. She returned to the room and answered, a friend. I was never more flabbergasted than the moment when I discovered that the caller happened to be none other than Rav Copperman himself. I could hardly absorb his own modest and sincere words of thanks for the letter I wrote him. A friend indeed, Miriam Dombey. Saba loved and cared for every student, every family member. During the Shiva, I walked into the kitchen to find about 18 of my cousins standing around in a circle and having a heated argument. I had actually walked in to shush them because they were getting loud and people were trying to sit Shiva in the other room. When I asked them what the argument was all about, again, I'm the oldest granddaughter, so they have to kind of listen to me. They said they were trying to decide which grandchild was the closest to Saba and who he loved the most. We're a competitive bunch, yeah. Each one was trying to prove that they were the closest and he loved them the best. He learned with me every day, said one. He called me every day, said another. He smiled whenever I walked into the room, said a third. And so it went. I told them they all needed to calm down and that it didn't really matter, and he loved them all, and that they were all special to him. Secretly, I smiled to myself. I knew who he really loved the most. Sabas loved each and every grandchild for who they were and never once tried to pressure us to become someone we're not. He was the first one we turned to for advice when it came to chinuch issues with our children, and he always had tremendous clarity and vision. He was a real ish chinuch and understood well the challenges that face youth today. I always noticed the great avas Yisrael and respect for every Jew that Saba displayed to all Yidden, no matter what their affiliation. If he had to give tochacha, it was done very carefully and with tremendous love. I heard at the Shiva that one time Saba was walking to shul on Shabbos, and a non-religious driver stopped and asked Saba for directions. Saba looked lovingly at the driver and said, "I'm torn. I would love to help you and give you directions to where you need to go. But if I give you directions, I'll cause chilul Shabbos." The driver was so impressed with Saba's sincerity that he got out of his car and walked to where he needed to go. Saba didn't have to give any musar. He was such a giant of a man, and his love for you changed you. I remember when I was a machal in Saba's Rabbeinu B'chaya class. There was one time that none of us bothered to prepare the material for the upcoming class. We were obviously too busy with more important things. Saba asked a few questions at the beginning of class and quickly caught on that none of us knew what he was talking about. He didn't say a word. He just walked out of the big Knesset. All of us were shocked, and none of us dared to move. We all sat there quietly and started to prepare the weekly assignment. He walked in about 20 minutes later, started teaching as if nothing had happened. Not one word of musar, anger, rebuke. But you can be sure that such a thing never happens again. Saba had an amazing combination of being so great yet so humble and approachable that I don't think anyone was even intimidated by him. He would sit in the lunchroom at Chala, and students would come sit down, have lunch with him, and schmooze as if they were old friends. People felt so comfortable with him because he was just so not judgmental. One Macha student told me how much it meant to her when at the end of the last Meshech Chachma class of the year, Saba asked each girl for her Hebrew name and gave each girl a bracha as she left the house. This took a long time, but each didn't matter to him a great deal. When I would go visit him on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the phone in his house would not stop ringing. Students from all over the world over many decades were calling to wish him a good year. Saba got such nachas from these phone calls, his face would shine, and he'd say, Hodul Hashem ki tov. In keeping with Saba's legacy, I would like to thank Hashem for giving me the chus of being Saba's eldest granddaughter, and having gotten married first and being blessed with children, they got to form a real relationship with him too. My husband and I would take our kids every Friday to visit Saba, and that was the highlight of their week. He had the latest and greatest nash cabinet, and each child would get to choose 3 treats, one for each meal, which, by the way, they all ate in the car on the way home, but we're not going to discuss that, okay? We would then sit in the living room, and Saba would ask the kids all about their week and some parsha questions, too. Saba would thank us profusely for coming and tell us that we made his week. One time, my husband had to take the car and run some errands on Friday. So I told the kids we wouldn't be able to visit Saba that day. They threw such a hafgana. They're Israelis, my kids, so they know how to do hafganot. It was such a hafgana that they're like, we're going anywhere where there's no public transportation. I'm like, there is. It just takes an hour and a half. But they didn't care. We took 2 buses and the light rail, which took about an hour and a half, but they were not willing to give up the visit to Saba. The Kohen Gadol had a mitzvah to light the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, it says, Ba'ascha es haneros. From this word we learn that there is a mitzvah to ensure that the flames of the candles rise on their own. Rav Hirsch teaches that this is the purpose and goal of every teacher, to ignite the student in a way that he or she rises on their own, that they learn to be independent and their own source of inspiration. This was always the purpose of Saba's chinuch, to ignite a flame that will continue to stay lit, continue to be inspired, and ultimately inspire others. One lesson that I feel we can learn from him is to always thank Hashem for all that he gives us. It's easy to forget that we owe it all to him, and to fall into the mindset of Magili. But Saba's constant message to us was to forever say, and sometimes sing, Le'olam Hashem Odeka. It's to you, Hashem, that I owe it all. Another lesson which we can learn from him is the many creative and ingenious ways which he showed us how to use the phone. He related to a phone mostly as an instrument through which to give chizuk to others. That's what he used his phone for. Several times a day, he would find a way to place a call to someone he knew would be moved by his call, whether it was a thank you to someone for doing their job well or to a relative he cared about. There's so much that we can learn from him, but this is one simple and relevant lesson. It's not hard to find people to call who will be touched by our call, and our phones are readily available to assist us. I've allowed myself to praise my Saba today, even though he was very humble, because I know that he would have forgiven me if there was a lesson to be learned. Specifically, a lesson which would ignite the listener, let us all try to learn the lesson of never feeling that we deserve things, that whatever happens at any given moment, we'll always see things the same way he did. Hodu Lashem Kitov.